early. We just wanted to open things up and let people funnel in. We're going to take a few minutes to kind of get queued up before Dad jumps into his pretty awesome live stream. We've been prepping this one for a minute, and he's going to give you some pretty cool stuff today. Today's going to be all about creating a hunter profile, and I'll get more into that once people start funneling into the chat here. We'll get into what a profile is, how to make one, and then how to use that to find the perfect hunting location, no matter what you're going after, and that'll be inside the profile as well. Good morning, welcome. Good to have you. Happy Sunday. Thank you guys for taking some time for us. Good morning. Yeah. Cool. All right. So I was probably thinking, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or so. You're in with us a smidge early. We wanted to make sure the connection was good. And we'll see how that's going. Vermont doesn't have the best Wi-Fi on the planet, so I'm gonna step back. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for funneling in. Rodney's been working. That's what he's been up to, and we've been putting together a pretty cool live stream for today. That's why we haven't done one in a while. We have another bunch of other videos we've been working on, but we're right up to our gills. So we've been very busy, but we're back. We're glad to be here, and we're gonna have some fun today. Today's gonna be about an hour or so, and if you have to dip out, that's cool. The replay will be up on the YouTube channel, so don't worry about that, and you can hop in and out. Today we're going to be talking about how to find that perfect hunting spot, and then we'll go into a Q&A at the end. There's a lot going on in the legislature. There's a lot of things going on with Fish and Wildlife, the chance for renewing some kind of hunting regs, some things around deer hunting, and some other things we're going to talk about. And we're gonna dive into those. If we really don't have much of a direction that you guys want to look at, we might go into some of that stuff that's happening right now in Vermont and New Hampshire and whatnot. So I'm gonna turn it over to Dad. He's gonna say hi. He's gonna catch up with you guys for a minute while I get a few things done on the computer end of things, and then we're gonna hop into it. Today's gonna be awesome. So, rip it.
Our condolences to everybody who's on TDS like we are. Jeez. If you had to have internet, they are like the worst. Yeah. A lot of what I want to talk about, especially during this one, is you guys feed some of your scenarios of where you live, the type of hunting you do, and stuff like that. Because there's almost like we're trying to develop like a calculator that you can type in some of your different circumstances that you have during your hunting, and then be able to go through and give you the odds of what your best odds are for the circumstances that you hunt with. I try to look at this from like a guide viewpoint. If you were a guide, some of the questions that you would ask your clients, right? It's really important, right? Because you're going with somebody else hunting. A lot of our hunting that we do, nearly everybody, tends to go with another hunter of some kind. So like you're not always by yourself. You're a lot of times in a group. You may be going out with your kids, or you're mentoring somebody and bringing them hunting. Also too, you may, when you're hunting on your own, if you can go through some of the different questions and ask yourself and adjust your style and the timing of whatever you have going on to maximize and get the most out of your season. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So what we're hoping for is to get a few of your scenarios, and then we'll work in and ask a bunch of questions to help work it out. I mean, when you're in deer camp and you're all talking and going back and forth and stuff, that's the kind of thing you do, right? Someone joins your deer camp and they come, or if you're a guide and you have somebody come hunt with you, it's real important that they give you some background about what they do, how they do it, and learn about it, and then be able to give good advice to somebody who might be new to an area, or somebody who's going someplace for the first time. Say you're going to go on a trip or something. This will apply to that as well. I often said, if somebody's going to be coming hunting with you, you need to know something about them, and you need to understand like how they might do it. And then you could give them advice at deer camp of like, well, I would try over here. If this is your first time in these woods and this is the way you hunt and this is your abilities, this is the way I would do it. We'll take a few of your guys' scenarios and then we'll ask some questions and then try and go through the right questions that'll end up where you'll get the best chance. And how you would go about that. It's like a giant deer camp discussion thing where you can actually calculate maybe where your best things are. Now, you may already have a system and you can compare your system to what I come up with for you to do, like that might work, or even some of you other people who are on with us and you have suggestions, and we can make a discussion about how to maybe maximize a person's scenario. Now, we wouldn't be able to get to everybody today, but if we pick out a few and you get some of the questions down, it might be a good idea to have pencil, paper or something and get some of the questions down, and you can help that person figure out, or help yourself, and you can see how somebody else, if they like you relate to them, you'll be able to know what to do.
Yep.
It gets you to think in a different way.
That's actually a good idea. Let's do that. If you guys have, if you have your like ability to like pull a phone out, get like a pad and paper, and kind of like follow along with this, you can build your own what we're gonna call like a hunter profile. And essentially, what a hunter profile is it's going to be like, who are you? You know, what are you after? It's going to be like, what's your method? Like, what's your, you know, what kind of implement are you using? What's your hunting style? That's going to be like, are you tracking? Are you a stand hunter? Are you a saddle hunter? Are you going to be still hunting? Are you putting on a drive in states where you can do that in areas? Are you on public land or private land? Like, what kind of other people do you have that are out in the wild with you while you're doing this? Are you on your own property? It's just you. Are you on like really heavily hard hunted public land? That's going to change things. When are you able to go? Is there a set amount of time? Like, what kind of time requirements are you? Because the smaller the window that you have to hunt, and I know that you guys have probably felt this too, like say you only have a week, or you're only gonna be in Maine for 3 days. What you do on those 3 days and how you approach that amount of time is gonna determine how successful ultimately you probably are going to be.
And what method you would use.
Right, so when you start compiling all these things together, you start getting an image of like, okay, if I'm going, it's just me, and I have tons of open public land that no one's really hunting, and I'm gonna be tracking with a rifle, and I want a big buck, when am I gonna go? Right? When am I gonna use that 1 week vacation that I have saved up? Or
and how am
I gonna maximize that? When is the best snow, right? How much money do you have to do this kind of thing? Because if you don't have a ton of money, you don't have a ton of time, and you don't have a ton of space, how you're gonna hunt is gonna be completely different. Right? And what state, you know, that's going to change things too, because where you're going to travel to, all that stuff. And we're going to talk about how to take all that info and then use that as like the base of what you have going on, and say, okay, based on all that, go here, do this on this time, this method. So that's what Dad's going to be talking about today. I know we've been going for about 8 minutes or so. People are starting to funnel in. We're so excited you guys are here. Hell yeah. 45 people. 46, 47, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing your Sunday with us. This is gonna be awesome. And we're gonna hop in, we're gonna kind of follow along this kind of map here, this hunter profile map. And then once we have a profile made, we're gonna say, okay, this is who I am, this is how I do things, this is how I like to do it, this is the style of hunting I wanna do, and then here's where you should go based on all those things and the timing and all that, to maximize your best chance to get what it is you're after. So.
And then in the end, we'll get down to refining right down to maybe even where to start on that chunk of land and some of the things you need to be looking for. Now, what'll be important about this, and what'll make this work pretty decent, I think, is that the back and forth that each of us that we do as we do, everyone's watching the back and forth, and you might be able to use that to help get you to ask yourself the right questions, or to say, well, I've always been doing it this way and I never thought of that, right? So like everyone has little parts of it that they might have thought of or didn't think of, and some of that adaptive change that comes about when just the regular hunting banter happens can be a life changer for like, and a wicked success changer on how you do. One of the things too is like some of the stories. I was watching Hal and Lee Shands, and they're back and forth on a podcast when they were talking about some of the hunting methods that some people have and others don't. And I was watching some of that, and like I was relating to some of that. And when somebody says something, you go, oh, right, yeah, I remember seeing that before. So right, that's a really good thing. When you have those kind of scenarios that pop up, that's why I think podcasts are so popular too. They do really well. And too, it gets somebody to think not only and agree with what you got going on, but to think of a way of solving it. And they ran through a scenario, and then it wasn't a day or two later, and a fellow comes in the shop, and he's like, man, I'm having this issue with this one little thing, and this is what I got to change. And that got me thinking about this, right? So when I was thinking about that and talking to him, I was like, man, this is a good direction to go, because it's like that banter that you would have when you're having one little problem somewhere and you want to get caught up and figure out how to overcome this one little thing, or how to ask yourself the right things. Or even if you're going to go on a guided hunt, to ask the guide and find out just what the deal is with him. If you're going to go on a guided hunt and you're talking to different guides and you're checking out the areas of what they've got going on and their expertise, and here you are laying down your resources to go there, and the kind of style and the type of hunting you do. So like there's a checklist that you make, and you answer questions every time you go hunting. So we're gonna go run through those questions, and by picking somebody out and then going with it and saying where they are, what's happening. So let's get started anyway. So what do you got, Taylor? Pick somebody out here and let's
Sure.
talk. Let's
do,
talk. We'll go back and forth with them.
Let's do Josh Swag. Is that cool, man? You were the first one to hop in the chat with us. Do you mind if you kind of play along? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna follow the chat here, if you're okay with that, and we're gonna have you build your scenarios. You know, you're in New York, you know, and it says that in the chat. So Dad's gonna kind of chat with you, and if everyone could kind of just like follow along, get out your pad or paper if you have it. These two are kind of gonna go through it. Can you read this chat, Dad? Is that cool?
Well, a little bit. You can read some of his stuff. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we'll go from there. When you go hunting, you're probably mostly just hunting just for you, going by yourself. Do you hunt with somebody else? Are you in a group, or do you hunt alone a lot? That's a big part of the of how you go and when you go. And if you're hunting just for you, the next question would be, and if you are, what kind of hunting are you doing? What are you hunting for when it comes to deer themselves? Any deer, any buck, big buck? Some of those things will matter. We'll also need to know, like, what's your timing? When is like your vacation, and what is the rut conditions when you go hunting?
I'd say let's do this while they're getting ready. Do yours. Let's do yours, and then we can do some of theirs. So build your own profile.
So number one, when I go hunting, I'm mostly not going for myself. I'm hunting with somebody else. So their energy and what they bring to your hunt changes things quite a bit. And their timing, what they've got going on. The other thing is, if we talk about that, I'm hunting for the camera. So that completely changes what my hunting day is going to look like, and it's something to think about. If you hunt out of a camp where nobody gets out of bed, or everybody gets up at 4, like that changes your dynamics. If you're tired, like all that stuff. So when you're considering all those things and it gets time to go out, it's important to ask yourself some of these questions. If you're looking for any deer, or if you're buck hunting, going for multiple deer and just any old deer, say it's youth weekend and you're going out with a kid, you would hunt differently than you would if you were just hunting for yourself. So when I go out, I'm looking to film any deer I can see. I'm also, I have a whole month. I usually hunt for like 6 weeks straight. So while I'm out there, and if I run down my checklist, I'm hunting for the camera, I'm hunting for just plain old footage of some kind. I'm thinking about my opportunities for filming almost all the time. I'm filming an intro, I'm filming an outro at the beginning and the end of the day. I'm trying to get something solid recorded during the day. Plus I'm trying to optimize my chance of seeing, especially a big buck, and shooting it if I can. But I'm also willing to just get most anything on film. And if I run across some moose, I'm going to take a few minutes and do that. I have some flexibility because I have so much time to hunt. So my profile is that I've got a ton of space. I've got a lot of time. I have time to lollygag a little bit and do some filming, but I also can take the few minutes that I might need to really assess the day and what's going on. I hunt in lots of different weather. So I'm going to do quite a bit of bear ground hunting. I'm also going to cut right to the chase a lot with my tracking when the time comes and the snow and the conditions are right. I'm just going to like apply myself on those days differently than I would if it was bare ground. If the temperature's warm, I'm going to be hunting shade, anything over 40 degrees. And sunshine, I'm hunting shade like almost all the time. Even the moose, deer, they all want to be in the shade if it's above 40 degrees during the daytime. And if it gets into the 60s or something, the shade is even more important. So it changes where you hunt and your abilities to gauge what's the best thing to do today. And a lot of times we're not asking ourselves these questions as we do it. So that's fairly important as well. You'll have to work your way through some of those questions. And with me having so much time, I'm trying to get film. I'm optimizing what's happening for that day. If it's real warm and it feels like I should just sit down or take a nap, it's one of those days, and I know the game is doing that. I know that I'll have to be moving in order to see something. I'll probably have to almost step on it. Most everything will be in shade and thick cover, and I'll also probably have to hunt relatively slow and quietly. Right? So as I go through and I think about all the things of how I am, and I develop my own personal profile of the way I do it and how I do it, you'll be needing to do these same things to yourself, and you'll come up with all kinds of new ideas, and you'll come up with like a routine that you can work with yourself. And I'll just walk outside and I'm doing an assessment. When I was fishing, when the kids were little and we did a lot of bass fishing, I would tell the kids, go down to the shore and tell me what the pumpkin seeds are doing. So the boys would run down to the dock and they'd just look at all the little perch. They would bring their poles with them with some kind of lure, and they would dunk it in the water and see if the perch were aggressive, and the perch would come over and look at it. I'd say, so how are the fish feeling today? What's their deal? And of course they were little, and they'd run down there and, oh, I'll check. And oh, this one wants to bite, and they like yellow today, Dad. And they really want to bite a lot. Or they just come up and look, but they don't want to bite. Then we knew by that assessment of how it feels and what the deal is, what the bigger fish were probably likely doing as well. When fish feed, they feed. And when they're not so much, they're not so much. So we would go out and get a feel for the day, the wind, the weather, the waves, the boat traffic. It'll be the same thing with your hunting. How much the people are moving around, how much the weather, the wind is blowing, all those things. And you'll start asking yourself and looking at the conditions and then saying, okay, in these conditions, I will do X. And those 60-degree hot weather, it's the November 1st through the 5th. And I get out there and it's smoking hot. We arrive kind of late. It's probably 8:30 or so. We've driven 20 miles. We've seen a couple of deer. So they were moving first thing in the morning in the daylight. And I said, well, there's a big buck that lives over here. He likes this side of the mountain, his shade. It's hot today. This is probably where he's going to be. There's a little bit of greenery up in there. There's been a lot of people traffic down here. And I think right there, and I'm going to walk and sneak and go right to boom, and elevator buck's dead, right? That type of scenario of this is what I'll do under these conditions. And what you pick is very important. And a lot of times we'll get stuck in those questions.
Yep.
So if he said he's hunting in New York?
We haven't had any response quite yet on that. He's in New York trying to figure out the deer on a small parcel with less than 20 acres.
Oh yeah. Now the size of the hunting area, that's another huge thing. If you only have like a 20-acre area that you're hunting and it's kind of small, we'll just guess, since it's New York, he probably has a relatively decent sized herd. And the first thing I would say whenever I'm on a small piece of property and I kind of have to make sure and kill the deer right there, and I don't want to disturb it any more than I would have to, first thing I want to know is what's the general wind direction most of the time on that parcel of land. And fortunately for us, most of the time it's the wind's coming from the west and headed east. Yeah, if you got something, So I want to know the wind direction
Try one of them.
for the most of the time.
You can see that a little better.
Yeah. I want to know the wind direction. And of course, New England, most of the time it's west to east. Next thing I want to know is where am I accessing the property from? So say there's a little farmhouse down here in the corner with a field, and we've got 30 acres here or whatever, and the wind generally blows that way, and this is where I get in and park. Now the deer could be in any situation. They might be on the edge of the field, bedded down, depending on the time of day. Say there's a little hump or a swamp, that could be either one. There's some kind of terrain features. First thing I'll do is bring it up on Onyx and have a look satellite view of the property. Onyx is awesome, number one, because it shows the property lines and property owners. So that's really nice. If you don't have Onyx, I'll bring out my maps. My regular maps on my phone has satellite. And when I bring up the regular maps, and especially if I have service, I can see myself on there. I now can see the shape of the property itself. I could see where deer would likely to be. I would like even, almost say, well, they're probably on this kind of conditions, they're probably here or here. If there's a lot of shade on the backside of the hill, maybe right there. If this is a swamp and there's a big bunch of spruce, right? Odds are good they're going to be bedded in the spruce near the swamp there someplace. And if the wind is directed and they're coming down to the field somewhere to eat, like the prime time, and the buck, if you're at, say we're after a big buck to boot, we're going to want to be in away from it a little bit. We want to get in without disturbing things too much because it's a small piece of property. The other thing is to be real mobile. It's real important to not repeat too many times. If you keep going back and repeating, all the deer will figure out where your stand is and go do their best to avoid it. They'll know when you come and go. They really pay attention to you on small property. The other thing is being real quiet on small property. It's very important that they not know you're out there. And when they're listening, a lot of times, especially in suburban type areas, deer love to be someplace where they can listen to everything. People make a lot of racket when they're walking with their dog, when they're doing their regular life. People are fairly noisy. And if the deer can lay there and he knows the routine of that property, and then all of a sudden he hears a metal clink over here that he doesn't normally hear, just avoid that totally. He'll be like, oh, there's something over there that ain't quite right. That's out of the routine. Somebody walked through, he comes out at night and he starts doing his normal routine and then goes, ooh. So security cover on the property is real important. I would also, with the satellite, start checking out all the neighboring properties and what's going on with each one of those neighboring properties. And if the deer are staying on the neighbors and then coming on to yours, where's the best place to intercede with that? And using the Onyx and the wind and being able to sneak in someplace and set up and do a surprise, and especially early or late season, it'll be real important not to disturb the locals too much. The local deer will do a lot in their movements that will attract the deer that aren't local during the rut to those same areas, right? Deer will use and lay down sign in a certain pattern on a landscape, and then a buck that comes from 10 miles away during the rut, he will end up going exactly where those deer go as well. So it's real important about not messing the locals up. I always will ask myself, is this an any deer stand or is it a buck stand? Buck stands, you don't disturb all the other deer that are around and you only shoot buck from it. And that early part of the season or the late part of the season when he's under his normal routines will be your best odds of killing, especially a bigger buck on a small piece of property is surprise, surprise, first thing early when he's on a steady routine. Once the rut starts, who knows where he is, and where he is will only be for a short while and he's going to be moved on again. So there's a lot more randomness to the rut, and you may want to stick with the does a little bit more during the main part of the rut. And that little sanctuary that he's used to hanging out in will be a little tougher to hunt.
One of the things that we will do, we did for the masterclass and we did for some of our hunt stock seminars, was we built a little deer season playbook. And what that was at what phase of deer season are deer in what phase of the rut. So where are the bucks in the end of October? Where are they in the first week of November? And as the season progresses, what is the behavior change? Because the thing to keep in mind is, as you build this, when you are going has a lot to do with what the behavior of the buck is going to be. Because whether we have snow or not, in the second week of November, he's moving. He just might not be moving out in the sunny, open 65 degrees in the clear cuts and stuff. They might not be out in the cornfield at that time. They are moving because they're starting to get restless. Hormones are starting to come up. The light is changing. The does are changing. Everybody's starting to feel that preseason thing, and actually some of the does are starting to come into heat a little bit. So the bucks are beginning to circulate. Now that means if it's super hot and you don't want to move around and it's stale and you only have, this time, it's not like you can hunt at night. So where are you gonna be? And we were on a day just like that, and we said, well, it's the first week, so the bucks are gonna circulate in little localized areas, and the big boys are not leaving yet. They know the does are not in heat yet, and there's no need to leave their security cover. They stay back. So we're like, well, it's 60 degrees, they're circulating, and where can we go that is way out of our way, that is hard to get to, that's a pain? So like, well, let's go on the north side of the mountain, up in the top greenery, where it's easy walking but hard to get to. So we said, okay, we drop Dad off, he goes up, he does a swing on the mountain, he gets on those old dozer roads, and he just easy creeps along in the darker timber on the north side. Buck walks right up to him, pow. Now, is that luck? Not really, because the probability was that we had done all of our research, we had thought about all the conditions, and we said, well, what's our hunting style? We have a rifle, and we're not gonna sit still. Because if we're in the wrong spot and they're only circulating localized and they're not making these big rut swings that they do when they're cruising for does, we're not gonna get any action. They're not gonna come to us. So we had to go to them. So that we put all of that stuff together, and that increased the best odds. Now, none of this guarantees you're gonna get a buck, but what it does do is it does put you in the best chance to use what you have. Because you only have, if we don't get any snow, 2 years from now in November, what are trackers gonna do? Gonna be done for. Unless they have a way to adapt their hunting style and a way to change and pivot based on what the conditions are. And that's one of the things that we've had to do recently, as anyone in New England knows, the snow seems to be later and later and later and later. And when it comes all at once, shuts off, and then we get crunch by the end of the season. And then we have to deal with these continual patterns that we keep getting hit with. And unless we adapt our hunting style, it's gonna get harder for us. So what we wanna do now is, if everyone has a pad and paper or anything like that, let's write down what it is you're after. Are you after any deer? Are you after a doe? Any buck? Doesn't matter, legal buck. Or are you after a big buck? Write that. You're gonna put that down for yourself. What is your hunting method? Are you a stand hunter? Do you want to still hunt and just kind of move from spot to spot? Are you a tracker? Do you need snow to do your deer season the way you want to do it? Or do you have a team? In your state, are you in Pennsylvania? Are you in Tennessee? Can you drive? Do you have the ability to push the woods a little bit more? Go through that.
Check out your hunting area itself. If you're, say, going for a brand new spot, I'll just randomly take a map, put my finger down, and then spread out from there and find a hunting spot. I'll look at the access for people to get to it. I'll check it out on satellite and see where people get to it. I'll see where the prevailing wind normally blows. I'll see where people are likely, the landings and the places where they're likely houses or whatever, they're likely to enter the woods and how that would affect things. I'll search out some pinch points, and then I'll travel to those pinch points when I do my scouting, or I'll say I would put a camera there as well. There's a lot of fellas who will spend more time scouting and less time hunting. Myself, we don't scout hardly at all. We just walk into the arena and just go under the present conditions. And I have no knowledge if that big buck that was there last year is still alive or not. I don't know. We're just gonna go and find out. And the conditions as the rut changes and the timing of, say, your hunting season or your vacation time, if I'm doing that as well, even if I had that small parcel that was out someplace I had never been before, I'd say, okay, if I was just hunting and I had an entire month to go and I could just go whenever, and it's a small piece of property, I would wait for the day to be perfect, and I would hunt that security cover when I found a bunch of sign, and there's definitely a good buck. I was driving down the road and I saw a big giant buck in this field, right? I know there's a buck there now. Don't need to know any more than that, right? Right off the bat, I know there's one there. So now we'll start our search and spread it out until we could really kind of just guess 4 or 5 good spots where we think the security cover for that particular deer is, and then nail it down a little bit more. Say put a camera in every one of those security spots and just see what you get. If you get a ton of nighttime pictures and no daytime pictures, I don't like to hunt where you got a nighttime picture. That's where he is at night. That's where he feels comfortable. That doesn't mean he's there during the day. You hunt during the day, so it's very important that you know where he is during the day. So once I find him, now I want to spend more time getting it nailed down to right exactly where he is. If you're, say, tracking and you're in a place where there isn't much space to track, I'll use the wind, use my entrance point, think about how and when other hunters use the land and where the deer's security cover might be, where they would flee to. I would even check out the surrounding properties that I can't hunt. I would look at them as well, because they'll be a big factor in what moves and the timing of what moves on the land that you're in, along with the timing of your hunt and the weather during your hunt. And then also develop a bunch of different places so you have multiple options. A lot of hunters, I talk to a lot of hunters, and they never do the same thing twice. And then there's a ton of them who do the same thing all the time. Some of it is successful, some of it isn't, some of it is timing, and they're not considering all of the different moves that would make what they did to be the best it possibly could. In Massachusetts, tracking is hard to many stand hunters you push deer into. That may be the case, that you could push deer into somebody else. Myself, that doesn't hurt my feelings any. If somebody else gets a deer, that really doesn't. A lot of times when they're coming in and say they were running late and they jump the deer and it comes back to you, big deal. I never let other hunters bother me all that much, but I do watch and pay attention to their habits and what they do, because that's part of the system as well, for sure. Yeah, dry leaves, wet leaves, frozen leaves, snow, soft, crunchy snow. There are a lot of hunters that are really worried about sound, and they were told and programmed, oh, you need to be super quiet. Yes, there are times when you do need to be quiet, and those big ones, they're listening. That old doe who's been there for 6, 8, some of them are 10 years old, right? They've been living in that spot for a long time, and you make one sound and they're like, I'm out of here, and they take a buck with them. That type of thing, yes, that happens quite a bit. There's also, like, especially in the big woods, there are times when we're up north and, like, you cannot be quiet. And if they're just laying someplace, I will leave my best spots alone until the conditions are perfect. And on those days when it's crunchy and it's terrible and it's noisy and I need to go and have a look, and especially since I didn't spend a great lot of time scouting preseason, all the really good spots, I avoid them till everything is just right. Then I'll go over here in a new area and check that out when the conditions are, not so much. And if I do disturb them or whatever, it ain't really the end of the world. I'm just kind of learning that spot. And if I find a 2-year-old in it, next year I can go back and I know his drill, right? So I can still put my day to good use. And even if it's just during the middle part of the day, if I had a small property and I was going to hunt prime time and I wanted to be quiet and careful and not disturb things, and I only wanted to be there a little while and take a chance on getting that buck in the early part, I would spend the prime time after that target deer when I had a good opportunity, especially not during the rut. Like a lot of the target bucks that people have, they want to go after them even during the rut, and most of the time during the rut, all the bets are off. That's like your worst chances of killing your target buck is during the rut. Once in a while it happens, but a lot of the big target ones that you've got on camera or whatever, you're going to get them early or late. and it's not too often you get them during the rut. They don't stay anywhere for long.
Yeah, pop up.
Yeah, even when they're in a location, they're chasing a doe. So they're like moving all the time. And when the rut is going crazy, getting a target buck's gonna be a lot tougher. It's a little easier to get any buck, especially if you have a lot of doe around. Any buck could come along at any second. It could be a good one. But like that target one that you really want, you want to get them early or late. It's a lot. You're playing, the odds are better when it's not during the rut on that target deer, provided he hasn't been disturbed too much. Yeah.
Right.
So as you start working through your questions, right, of what we ought to do and how we ought to do it, you have to look at your method and what you're going to use, and then look at the season dates and think about the timing of the rut and what would be happening during when you can go. And if you're a stand hunter, you're going to be really focusing on locations as much as you can, plus mobility and adaptability of moving to some sign or something. If there's a whole bunch of old buck sign going up the edge of the hardwoods and whips, like they were talking about there last week, and there's a ton of traffic that's right there, and then you go back the following year and there's no traffic at all, you better move. Like you have to adjust and change your behavior when things aren't working, and be adaptive enough to go to something else.
Let's do one. So this season, I have a video for it. We haven't built it because it wasn't that exciting, and I'll tell you why. This season, I took my bow tracking in Maine, and it was the last week of rifle. So I was attempting to track with a bow end of the season. Now, towards the end phase of the rut, when the deer movement has slowed, a lot of the does have been bred. You know, we're almost to muzzleloader season in Maine, and all the big boys are shacked up for the second kind of the does that are coming into heat. The big boys have kind of slowed down with them, and all of a sudden you get into that kind of stale transition of winter where it snowed a bunch, and now you have like a high pressure system moves in where there's no wind, there's no anything. Right?
And they've been pressured.
And they've been pressured. So the deer have had a whole season where there's been other people getting on the deer's case. They've been tracked, they've been pushed around, a bunch of really nice deer have been taken. I go out with a bow to try to track. I can't get on a new track, and there's not a lot of movement. And I'm going dynamically through the woods in a non-ready position all the time, because it's so thick and I have to be dynamic as I'm going through the brush. I can't keep an arrow like racked. I'm gonna walk through the woods with a broadhead ready to go, right? So one of the things is my probability of success was so low because I didn't have a fresh track. I had a bow, so I had to be in Maine with a low deer population in thick woods inside of 30 yards with a clear shot and get a fresh track. Right?
On deer who've been hunted for a month.
Had I, other than just the fun of trying something a bit difficult, had I laid that whole thing out, I'd have said, that's probably not gonna work. Let's pick something else. The thing that would have helped was say, okay, I'm gonna swap back to my rifle. Because with that same scenario, if I switched out to a rifle, at least my effective range that went from 30 yards just went to 150 yards, 175 yards, right? Because I'm a pretty decent shot. I know what I'm doing. I only take good shots.
How many times much more?
How many times more likely am I able, if I can triple my effective range, if I get a chance at a deer, right? Plus the speed and the readiness I am to take advantage of a buck being inside that zone with me. Because if I have a bow and he's at 40 yards and I don't have an arrow rack and he's looking at me and it's the still weather and I'm making noise, my odds of success are so low that it's like going into that with all that laid out, it's like, yeah, I shouldn't do that. I should do something else, right? So this is what we want to give you, is just give you kind of a map to like step back at your situation. It only takes what? How long did that take? 2 minutes? 2 minutes to discuss whether that was a good idea or not. And had I done that in the beginning of the day, I might have got a deer that day. But I didn't, because I didn't lay it out and I didn't say, well, what are my best chances? How do I use what I have to actually like get a shot at this, right? So, but had it been second week and I hunted edge by lots of more open areas and didn't need a track, and I just went where the does were, second week, my odds of getting a buck with a bow still hunting would have been a lot higher, right? Just by shifting things around. Instead of saying, instead of doing it at the end of the season, because I have a lot of length of time and the bucks are starting to circulate and they haven't found does yet and they're not in the heat. So they're out walking during the day, during the night, towards the end of the second week. The movement of the deer would have worked in my favor because I at least had a chance of seeing a buck.
And food and security cover would have been a big part of what
It would
you
have been a
did.
bigger part.
Right. And that'll matter as well. You know, what's going on there. Yep. Board reads backwards, is this?
Oh, does it? Oh, that's no good.
Well, you can't
Let me
have that.
try something, guys. Let's flip this baby around. Is that better? I'm sorry.
We won't be able to read.
I won't be able to read you guys, but
It was handy.
let me try something.
Yep.
It was handy for
Are
a
we
minute.
on target?
Yeah, hold on, let me adjust her here.
Some of the deer in the background there are just some of mine. I've got a couple of 130 inches there and probably 6, 8, I don't know, it's probably eight or so that are in the 220s, 230s.
How's that? Is that better, guys? Our apologies.
That's no good.
See, it looked all right on our end, but it
Right.
didn't look good on yours. Sorry about that.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So basically what this is you going over yourself, understanding like your things, and then deducing what the best odds for you are. That's a big part of it, is like deducing what your best odds are. It's really important that you understand how you hunt and how you might be limiting yourself unnecessarily, or how to make sure that you're maximizing what you've got going on as well. I know a whole bunch of hunters that can go into an area and just even look at it on satellite and say, okay, right here, right here, right here, there's a pinch point at this beaver dam. There's a whole bunch of greenery, and there's a connection between the two of them, and there's a logging road that cuts right through it. And when the deer get down, they stop, check out the logging road, make sure it's safe, shoot across, and then go over here. There's all kinds of like little adjustments that you'll have to make all the time when it comes to some of that stuff. And when you read yourself and you say, okay, what am I doing that works, and make a list of what you do that works really well and what you do that doesn't seem to work. And then like understanding your self-discipline of how you do it and being adaptable is really important. It's easy to get stuck in a rut and a routine that has worked over and over. I've been a taxidermist for 40 years and literally know tens of thousands of hunters. And by listening and watching and seeing the successful ones, success leaves tracks for sure. And the ones that are really adaptable, they understand what they commonly do right and wrong, and then take best advantage of especially what they do right, and they know how to use their resources well, they do really good. That part of it makes a huge difference as well.
Okay, guys, I actually want to do something real quick. This is going to be kind of a little side quest here, but I think this deviation will be worth moving us off. I just kind of want to see if we're doing this right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a pretty avid reader. I like studying. I like learning new things. I actually picked up a new book recently, and I found a nice little nugget that I think will fit in really well. So here we go. This quote says, "If you want to accelerate your rate of achievement rapidly, you must search out and vigorously employ new behaviors." Now, that's kind of what we're talking about here. And if you're having a ton of success the way you're doing it, and you want more of the same of what you're getting, continue to do more of what you're already doing, right? This doesn't imply that you're not successful in the way that you hunt. If you're not getting what you want out of it, let's try a new approach. That's simply what this means. If your hunting spot and your hunting method and all these, your profile and the way everything's kind of landing together isn't getting you the results you want out of your deer season, then let's try something new. Let's at least establish where we're at. Let's say, like, how much time do I have? What am I using? What really matters? What am I after? Is it a big buck, right? And once we start kind of employing a new perspective on our own situation, we can see options for how to go about it a little bit differently. Because sometimes just changing the way you look at something changes what you look at.
Another big part of it is the history of the area. Say you're gonna go to someplace new. Myself, if there's some place that I'm planning on going to, and especially like here in New England where we report,
coffee?
sure, where we report our deer, we get to those report stations and we review the deer that have died at those report stations. That is such good information. The numbers, the sizes of them, the dates when they all die, and which days are peak days. There's so much information that is just waiting for you to kind of check out and understand. The other thing would be like your big game trophy clubs, your record books. That's another place. If you're looking for a 150-inch deer in Vermont, you want to go to the Vermont Big Game Trophy Club and look at the county that they're getting shot in. And it may vary from year to year, but you'll get down 2 or 3 or 4 counties where it's really happening for the deer herd and for that habitat. And that's really why they're getting dead there. You'll find out and you can say, okay, if they're happening, say Windsor County is where they're at, and you go to Windsor County and you go through it all, that'll be a real important thing that'll help like crazy. And like your research, your other scouting can be some of that history thing. Don't be afraid to check out the history of an area and to understand it. If you're looking for a Boone and Crockett and you come to Vermont, you're going to be a long hunt because we don't get very many of those. But if you're looking for a 130-incher and you look at the different places where they come from, and then even if you can't go there and actually hunt, but you look at the area anyway and see the kind of landscape that it is and the terrain kind and some of the things that you can learn from that and then bring that over to where you are, what a difference that'll make. If you review one area and how the deer use and you understand how they use one spot, you can now bring that, especially with the satellite, you can bring that over to your area and have fresh eyes and look at it anew. The other thing is ask other people, what would you do? People can't wait to give advice. And people love to give advice. So ask them about it. Now, it might be good advice and it might even be not. That'll be your part to filter out. But boy, is it worth it. And you can learn quite a bit. Adaptability, yeah, you know it, Eric. Yep, absolutely. One of the things that is probably your greatest limiting factor to how you do, or your greatest benefit as well, is understanding yourself. Make a list of what you're doing wrong. Make a list of what you do right. Have a list. I love to have a list of the different places I hunt and keep track of it all so that you can say, well, I hunted over here and I hunted over there and I hunted here. And then I say, okay, where haven't I hunted that I would love to give it a try? And I always dedicate a little bit of my hunting season to doing the different thing, which is what Taylor was just talking about in his book there, right? Picking up a new habit, picking up something different, trying something new. And like, don't be scared of it. Just give it a whirl. I'll take a spot, I'll look at it on the map, and I'll look at it on Onyx or on the satellite, and I'll say, ooh, right here looks good, right here looks good, right there looks good. I'm gonna take 2 weekends from March to May. I'm gonna take 2 weekends and I'm gonna go check out a new area. I'm gonna expand myself a little bit and learn a little bit. I'm gonna go to a seminar. I'm gonna go to a Fish and Wildlife board meeting. I'm gonna do something. Make yourself more well-rounded, learning more about deer in general, like I'm always studying deer, the landscape and all of the secrets that it has. And the more I understand, the more I can cut to the chase quicker. Most of the time you suffer from the things you don't know and what's going on there. Desolate, how to maximize my areas. Stay out of rabbit jail. How thick is too thick, and always worried about going too fast on the track and making too much noise, but not closing the gap. Those are all of the tracker's dilemmas, right?
Yes, 100%.
And the answers to those questions will vary along the track as you're doing it even, which makes it even more difficult. For starters, if it's so thick that you can't move through it quietly, and it's so thick that you don't feel like you could get a shot in it, but especially if the deer went through that, you got to go through it. So in the beginning, and it's a super thick spot, I mean, thick as in distance across. Say I got a really rabbit jail and I've got to go through it and the deer has gone through it. Now, when the deer went through it, what did it do? It just plowed. It just went right through it. You got to have to do the same, plow. But when you see yourself coming out of it, you want to slow down. You want to be quiet and you don't want to just bust out of rabbit jail into an opening and the deer is standing on the other side of it because he just went through it. In your brain, as you go through those things, you can see it as woods or you can see it as a path through the woods. You can see things as a roadblock and you now look at the roadblock and say, okay, how do I get through that? What's the best way? Sometimes it might be a good idea to skirt the downwind side of it, but you will lose a little bit of time. You might lose a little bit of sense of what the deer's going. You might even waste some time going out around it and the deer went in and took and did one of those, right? That may happen. Myself, I don't like to leave the track a great lot. I'm not a big one for swinging because I'll lose some of the pace and the feeling of the deer and what's going on with them. And if I swing and spend a whole bunch of time, and as I swing, or even say he bedded down in there, and I start into it, and I'm like, I don't want to go through that stuff. And he went into the middle and laid down. And I start skirting, and now he shoots back out and goes back on his track. And I go round and round and round and round and round, and I can't seem to find him, and he hasn't come out, and I'm going, oh no. When you start circling, all right, and then boom, and he went right back through, and he was in there, and I was done. No matter what, those spots where he's good and you're not, they're gonna happen anyway. So I stay on the track and I do the best I can with what I got. And if he's in a spot where he's gonna get me, well, he's not gonna get to stay there. He's gonna have to move. So I'm gonna get him up. Now I have space where I hunt, so I can get him up and move him, and I'll try and move him to a place where I can do something about it. And hopefully he's screwed and I'm not. Now, as far as the speed and as far as being quiet, there'll only be times when you can be only so quiet. If you have a crust, they're gonna hear you coming no matter what. So I just kind of stay steady and I just kind of keep coming. I do my best. I stop a lot and listen a lot. I'll call a lot when I think the deer might be within hearing distance of me. That's another advantage a little bit. Although with all of the calling that everyone's doing, when you get a buck and you bust him, that's a big deal. That buck that Casey called in on a Sunday morning up there, that buck left that area. Now, if you watch the video, Casey calls in the buck. He has the tipper can and the buck comes right in. The buck comes in behind Casey and he is standing, as Casey is filming, he's standing on Casey's backtrack. So he's smelling where Casey just barely walked a minute ago. And then he looks right at him. And then he goes back to checking and he's like, boy, that is not a deer, but it sounds like a deer. Now, he's never had this happen to him before, and he's probably, I don't know, 120, 130 inches.
No, he's more than that.
He's a big deer.
He's bigger than that.
He's a big deer.
Buck 30, buck 40 inches.
And
It's a freaking slammer.
He's sniffing the ground, and he's looking at Casey, and Casey is now, he's been quiet for a while because he's so close, right? You stop calling when they're really close, and when you can see them, you just leave them alone. You want them to search for you. You don't want them to find you. Stop calling when you're real close, right? So he's real quiet. And the deer is looking, and he's like, no, man, that's a man. And he looks, and then Casey gives him the all-well tail waggle. You know when a deer is standing in a field, and they look around, and then when they think everything's okay, they go jingle, jingle, their tail goes jingle, jingle, and they go back to eating. Casey takes his hand, and he does a jingle, jingle, and that deer chills right out. He's like, it is a deer. And then he goes back to the ground. No, it isn't.
This, what you just heard is probably our most recent and most incredible discovery, realization for hunting strategy. Now, this is like gold. You're not gonna hear this anywhere else because we've never heard it. We just had a realization and we tried it.
Dad remembered it.
I
used to do it when I was a
he
kid.
put two and two together, right? And kind of vitalized this idea of bring one white glove, wear your orange, but bring one white glove in your non-rifle, whatever hand. And when you see a deer, you do this. Now, deer are called whitetails. They communicate with their tails, right? And when they look at each other and one does this, and they're like, okay, but if you go like this, I'm out of here. It's time to leave.
Yeah.
See ya. Or whoa.
Yeah,
Things aren't
something's
cool
up.
when you're standing there. When
Yes.
does are running from a buck in the heat, their tails are cupped. And they communicate with their flag, right? So it's like, well, what we're gonna start doing is start bringing one white glove. And when we see a deer down by our side, down by here, we're gonna do this. You wanna see some crazy stuff happen? Get a white glove, start hunting with that. That's gonna change your life. Casey kept a 130, 40-inch buck less than 20 yards for 10 minutes. 10 minutes while the buck was standing on his backtrack and got the buck to chill and start eating, okay? This could change your hunting future forever. Keep that in mind.
Now, as Casey just lays there filming the buck, and the buck goes back to investigating and takes a couple of steps down Casey's backtrack a little bit, and he sniffs the ground, and he goes, nope, that is not a deer. It's not a deer. And he blows at Casey, right? He starts to leave, and he moves a little bit, and then he starts blowing at Casey. Now that buck blew at Casey 38 times.
Yes.
You're a liar. Woo! You're a liar. You're not a buck. You fooled me, right? One of the things that's happening with all of the calling that everyone's doing is they're burning more deer than they're killing with a call. You're burning them. And when you burn a buck with that meh, and human being, meh, human being, you're a liar, you're a liar. And that buck blew at Casey 38 times. He was 200 yards away. Woo, woo, woo. Casey's talking to the camera, and he's laying there, and the deer's woo, woo, going on and on and on. That buck left that area. He went almost 6 miles from there. Never came back to that spot ever again for the rest of the season. He never went back to that spot. He was like, no way.
Yeah, you screw it up, it's over.
I bet if that buck hears a tipper can again, he's gonna run. He'll never fall for a tipper can again. So be careful on your target bucks. You start calling to them, right? Use it only sparingly when it will work the best.
Yes.
Because as soon as everyone starts going out and burning them, the deer are gonna pick up on it quicker. They're gonna learn. And then remember, a buck, any buck that is alive, every trick he ever pulled to get away from you has worked every time. The ones that didn't work, they're dead. They're on Rodney's wall over there, right? Right? They're all on my taxidermy wall. All the bucks that did the wrong thing.
Let's see, is that?
All the ones that made it, they worked out awesome.
Can you
And
guys see
everything
that?
they ever pulled worked.
Does that look good? Is that? Oh, let's let it catch up here. Okay, so I just want to have Dad go through this with us. We're gonna do like a quick little scenario map style thing. I'm gonna hop on Dad's side for a quick second.
Mm-hmm.
So here's something you guys can do. Get the coordinates, get the location, get the spot of the last really nice big mature buck that you killed. You're like a buck you'd love to shoot again because he's that awesome. You'd love to have that same story. Bring that buck up, find the spot on the map. Let's say this is your hunting spot. You have you got a town, you got a main road, you got a big patch of state land with a lake right here. And let's say you were hunting and you had worked your way up into this ridges, and right on the northeast side of this little triple bump right here, you were able to catch the buck in a pinch spot and you got him right here. Let's say this is New York, land you gotta walk a long way to get into. Let's say you got your buck that you were after, that big, nice, mature buck, you got him right there, right? Now what you wanna do, which this is actually pretty easy, is find the exact same or similar style layout on the map, right? Say you're gonna hunt a new state. Say we're gonna go to Maine. One of the things that's worked is if I've always killed bucks on the steep northeast side where I hunt back home, if I'm gonna hunt similar woods in a different area around the same time with the same implement, with the same amount of space, just a new area, I'm gonna look for this. I'm gonna look for similarities on these little like quadrants. Where can I find some lower areas that are kind of flat? The lower elevations probably have hardwood, they have some better feed right here. And then where there's some steep, secluded mess. Where can I go up in and find similar topography and similar seclusion, right? Big bucks can survive down by houses, but they don't like to be bothered. especially when there's no reason to be down there, when there's no does, when it's not deep winter. Like in Maine, they pull down because all the yards and the good places for them to winter are close, plus they feed them, right? That's another thing to know. So towards the end of the season, deer will often they'll funnel out of the woods to go where the deer get fed, right? So when I go to a similar time of the season, I'm gonna look for these similar styles on the map. Where can I find topography, layout, and the area that looks like where I've had previous success, and start my journey right there. That's a great spot to do some e-scouting and find a new area. If you have similar conditions, but you're in a new area, try that. That'll work good.
The other thing too that you can do is take all of your past deer and reflect on each one of those and what the circumstances and the conditions were, and the kind of terrain, the timing of the rut, and what was actually happening. You can go through each one of your deer and say, okay, this was the timing of it, this was this, this was this, this was this. Now compare that to your check station stuff. Compare that to the area that you got it and the other deer that were shot around that as well. I don't have to have a trail camera out there to know when the deer start zombie walking on the second week, because I can just go on Facebook and look at everybody else's cameras. Yep. And when I see that huge buck and he's doing this,
when you see daylight photos of big bucks moving,
yeah, and he's got the zombie walk on and he's doing this and he's going, right? I can, and 12 people have put out trail camera photos of the great big bucks moving. Now, if they're moving at night or moving during the day, right? I'm going through all of those, determining what, and using that as well, right? I'm even scouting while I'm there. You can scout and work on things all the time and keep up with that. When it comes to some of the areas and what's going on, say you did kill your deer and it's the first week of deer season and you've shot your deer.
Elevated back.
And you're all done. Now, what am I going to do for the rest of the season? Well, I'd either go to another state, and I would do that, right? I would do road work for the boys, right? They're all out here hunting. Rodney jumps in the truck and drives around and looks and finds a location of another deer and says, oh, there's another one down here that you can go and check out, right? I'll go look run camera for them. I'll finish utilizing the rest of my season. And you want to do that even after deer season is ended. When's the best time to go find sanctuary security cover of a big buck? Right after the season. So many people neglect scouting right after deer season. Remember, these are pressured deer. They've already been pressured. They've been worked pretty hard. You can put that to your advantage and find out, oh, there's a great big one that's hanging out here. Good, wonderful. He's in this general area, say a 4-mile circle. There's one big, huge one in this area. Now go find another one somewhere else. Find 4 or 5 or 6 different options of really good ones. And then take your cameras, put them out and try and get them during the daylight hours, during all times of the year, and nail down his security cover without disturbing him as much as you possibly can. Then pick the right day early in the season, target him on that day or 2 or 3, nail down where he's hanging out and he left a rub line, and you sneak right in there and get on that rub line on the perfect day. Surprise, surprise, he comes down, boom, and a lot of target bucks die that way. Those fellas who go to Maine and get up there and they only hunt for 2 or 3 days, they got a 200-pounder and they drive away, and they do it year after year. They're spending their early season time hunting while no one else is in the woods. They're out there doing it. Very important. Shed hunting, another wonderful way to go out and find out what's going on.
There's a little kind of rule of thumb, and this will be a good look, writer downer, is you can either hunt hard or you can hunt long. And you can't really do both, right? Because you'll probably get one by then. So you can either put the work in ahead of time, and that way when the season opens, you're probably gonna get it done. But if you wait till the season opens, you're probably gonna have to hunt harder, and you're gonna have to hunt a little bit smarter, right? You're gonna have to really condense all the scouting and all the work that everybody else does to be successful. You're gonna have to condense that right down to the 1 week that you have for vacation or whatever your scenario is. So if you can't put in the preseason time, or if it's in another state and you can't travel, every other weekend out to Ohio or whatever, you might have to just put a little bit more strategy and a little bit more logic. It's unbelievable the results you can get with a little bit of preparation, right? Going back to the bow hunting story that I said earlier, had I put in a few more minutes, just a few minutes before I went into the woods of preparation and strategy, I probably would have got a deer that day, because it wasn't a bad day to shoot a deer. It was an improbable way to shoot a deer the way I wanted to with all the other things that were going on, right? So a little bit of preparation can go a long way. You just sit down, think about your scenario for just a couple minutes and write it out on a piece of paper. Remember, you have the superpower of being able to lay things out in a way that you can see it is unbelievable. Use that to your advantage.
Joseph says, zone 5, track and stock from the truck. The timing is the 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. And what's the best areas to find the pockets of deer, and what areas are those?
So Maine.
So we're in Maine. We're in the middle part of the season, and on the main part of the rut.
Let's do it on the board.
Yep.
Let's do a live one here.
Okay.
There, I got you.
All right.
Okay, you ready? So Maine, we won't worry too much. We're not going to look at zone 5. We're not going to look at the map since we're on a live stream that's going to go to probably thousands of people. But we're going to say you're in Maine. You're going up into paper company land. You've got 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. So you've got 2 weeks.
So we're going to be on zombie walking and chase phase.
Yep.
Right? Zombie walking usually starts on the 2nd week of November, where the big bucks are feeling like they need to find a doe. And they know that there will soon be quite a few does coming into heat. There may even be a few of them actually in heat, from like say the 9th out through to the 15th. But for the most part, there's not very many. So the big ones are in the mood. They're restless feeling. They are starting to lay down a little bit of sign, but they're like restless feeling, and they start walking, looking for one. They're checking out and establishing their circle of where they like to circulate during the rut. They're running into other bucks, and they're also just checking does and other deer out in general, and especially during the more cooler, quiet times of the night and day, where it feels good to walk around, and they're generally in security cover. As hunting season gets going and the pressure increases and the bigger ones are starting to walk and feel restless, they're more likely, bigger buck, especially in the big woods, where they're seeing truck traffic, they're seeing pressure. This year, there was a ton of bird hunters, so there was a lot of vehicle traffic was like crazy. So they're avoiding the roads, and if they are going near the roads, they're watching them and paying attention to them a lot. They'll be on the downwind sides of roads. They'll bed down where they can hear and watch roads or intersections. The downwind side of intersections, they'll be checking out and keeping an eye and keeping tabs on things. And they'll be near the thickest escape cover they can get. They may not be in the escape cover, but they'll be on the edge of it. So they only got to take one jump and they're out of there. They're also generally, if they're going to be actually doing their zombie walking, and especially at night when they feel secure, they'll be going through the food sources that does visit. Now, those doe pockets, he was talking about, where do I find doe pockets? You're going to be looking for any amount of doe sign at all near some good food sources of some kind. So I usually start with cuts, and especially in Maine. I'm looking for cuts that are a good age for nipping, right? For the deer to be utilizing. And especially even if the moose are in there, that means the deer are using them as well. Any cuts that have the red whip sticking up in them are the right age. As soon as it starts getting up like to your chest or higher, it's not quite as good as it was from your chest down to your knees. If it gets below your knees, then they'll be in that some, but it's not quite as active. It's more kind of open, naked feeling. And they may not be out there so much during the day. If it's on a sloped hill with a lot of shelving, they could be out in those a little bit. But when it's a really new cut, say within a year or two, most of the time when you get into year 2, at first it's mostly dirt. Then cuts will turn into grass. And then as the grass starts to age out just a little bit and some of the whips start coming, the root balls start growing new suckers, especially soft maple, striped maple will all start coming up, and maybe fir, if it was an old fir stand that was cut. There'll be all kinds of new things coming up. And when it gets to about knee deep, that's when they really start utilizing it like crazy. And it's also like hairy enough for them to feel comfortable in it and lay down in it. So they'll be on the edges of those kind of cuts. And when the cut is like knee deep up to shoulder height, those are usually the most prime cuts to have deer and moose activity in them. So I'll look at the food sources in an area. Say we've got a couple of different cuts that are fairly new. A lot of times when loggers go into some area, there'll be successive areas. Like they'll pull out, there'll be like 3 cuts or 4 cuts clustered together, and all of the wood will have come to 1 or 2 landings of some kind. And of course there'll be some trees in between them all where it's kind of broke up into sections. Any activity, and especially all the fresh dirt of new cuts, is where I would be looking for doe tracks. So when it comes time to scout, even if it's just during the season, I'll take the truck and I'll drive up to those cuts that are knee deep and they have red whips up to shoulder height or even above me just a little bit. When they start getting into pole stage, they're like 1 inch, then they won't be using it anywhere near as much. It'll be more security cover and less actual feed. But as soon as I find the feed, now I'll circle those feed areas and look for doe sign. Look for just general deer tracks in general. And if I check out the dirt roads or even the grass covered roads, there'll be little dirt spots where the soil was there wasn't enough topsoil. It was like undersoil that came up and nothing is growing on it yet. And when the deer walk in those open areas of just dirt, it's dirt from underneath and it just isn't as fertile and it doesn't grow grass really easily. Those areas, they'll leave tracks in them. So I'm checking out, looking for doe sign around those prime cuts. And then I want to get doe direction to security cover near those. So if there's security cover near that food supply, now when it comes time to look for a track, I can pull in here and circle through that. And with your timing of the zombie walking, this is when a buck would be zombie walking through here and around here, and especially near the security cover, he'll be walking through those areas, just checking to see if there's any does around or in heat. So I'd use the food sources to find the doe pockets. Now, there might be a pocket here, and then 5 miles away, there are a couple other pockets in different places. There's a lot of land, especially in Maine, where there's just no deer.
It's like New York.
Yeah, so you spend a lot of time finding these groups, and now when the snow flies, check these groups, check that area real well. Now, you won't be the only person to do this. Everybody else is going to be doing the same thing, and where they walk and how they would do it. And if there's another way of getting to the backside of this mountain and there's a big washout and you got a certain kind of Jeep that can make it through there, and you say, okay, I see 4 truck tracks going down this way, and I pull up on fresh snow, I'm taking the turn and coming in on the backside. And now if they come in here, I got a better chance of having something come to me, right? You have to pay attention to what the other guys do and what you do.
Okay.
Now, as you move into that second week and they're actually in chase phase and now they're moving a lot more, this security cover is where they're going to be most of the time. There will be times when the moon is a little bit one way or the other, and they may be closer to the food source early and late in the morning, in the evenings, right? They could be in here some, but during the day when the rut really gets going and there's that one particular doe that's being chased, she's just gonna jump between the tight areas. They won't be worried about food so much because they're actually breeding. In Vermont, we do a roadkill survey of all of the does, and all of the roadkill does, they open up the uterus and they get the fetuses out of them before they're born, and they take a tape measure and they measure when the fawns were conceived. And in Vermont, our prime breeding is about the 22nd, when that's the peak of the rut, when there's the most does in heat at once. So that, pre-Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving week is when there's the most actual breeding. Now, when you're targeting a deer, and especially a big one, that's when the snow flies. That's why tracking is so successful during that time on big ones, is because number one, they're busy with the doe. They're moving some so that you could find a track, but they're not going a long ways because they have a doe. The trouble is they have friends, right? So now you have to deal with those circumstances, but you also know he's in there today. So that's a big help, and that's why that's kind of successful. Yep. Good places to set up is back from an open 100 yards or so. They lurk, but they
won't hit the open till the night. Setting up on open usually gets to see them at last light.
Yes, right? And of course, that transition area between things. Deer are animals of the edge. They're on the edge of stuff
Let's go back to our previous success map. And for everyone who just joined us recently and didn't get to see this, this is our success map. So let's say this is an area I've been hunting for a few years. I shot a nice buck here, a nice buck here, and a nice buck here. And you can see the pattern that I'm having where the northeast side of the steeper timber at that time of year in that area is where I'm finding all of my big buck sign, right? Now, edge creatures of the edge is a kind of how we've always referred to deer, where, down where all of a sudden there's a transition type where they can kind of like get back away from people, where they can always have some form of better perception. If the wind is coming this way, why am I finding success on this side of the mountain, right? The wind from all this side down here, and if everyone's coming in, entering this area, if people are coming in and the wind's going that way, he can detect everything that's happening west of him, right? So in order for me to get this buck, I had to come in down by the lake and then hike up in and keep the wind at my advantage so I can look this way. I can view down on the steep side of things and I get his advantage and I can come up and get him, right? And if that's my pattern, when I go to a new place to look, I'm gonna say, well, it's around the same time of year, it's about the same size of pattern and of area, the way the topography of the land is, if the temperature is about that same, I've got the same implement, I'm using the same style, I'm gonna check out that. I'm gonna go for mountains, I'm gonna go for topography, for edges and transitions. And even if I go to this place and I don't find a deer, what I will find is sign. And if I find no sign in that area on the types of places I've had success, it means there's something different about that patch of woods. And I have to then pivot and say, what other kind of success have I had? What am I seeing now? Because you might get there might be nothing. Now, is the lack of evidence of absence? Not really.
Nope.
Not really. Because remember, these are creatures that move, they're dynamic, they do things. And if there's no snow, and it's early in the season and the bucks really aren't laying down a ton of sign, does that mean there isn't a buck on this ridge? No, that doesn't mean that. It just means that is not where he is right now.
A lot of what'll happen is that sometimes you'll get into an area. When you get into an area and you start poking around in it and you just kind of swing through it and you check it out, which is something we did this year. We would come, we'd just say, okay, here's a way of getting into the woods. We'll just go for a walk along the edge and see what we can come up with. One of the things I absolutely love to do is to come across some sign of some kind, especially bigger buck sign. When you start finding big tracks, good sized scrapes, lots of activity, you can now take even your Onyx or even your maps and you start keying in and you string together a bunch of sign and you discover where it is and stuff like that. I may avoid it until, as soon as I find it on bare ground, I'll avoid that until the time comes when the snow flies, and now I can cut across that and utilize that. Also too, if you want to avoid other hunters, and especially in like where we are in Maine, where there's a swirling of people all the time, you can go out later. Let everybody go find something. Let everybody go out in the woods and decide where they're going for the day. And once they've all jumped into the woods and we drive out there and there's 10 trucks on this road and no trucks over there, and I know there's a big one on each road, but this one over here has no activity today, that's the one I'm gonna go and look for. Now, just because you don't find what you were looking for, say you found a big buck early, but you can't seem to find him once, and he may change locations totally on you, either with a camera or even during the season when you first went out. Quite a few times in the last few years, we've had snow early and then it disappears.
Right.
So
Ryan's
you
buck.
find a whole bunch of good stuff in that snow, and say you couldn't do anything with it, or you jumped him and you didn't get a chance to get a shot at him, or you moved him or whatever, and then all of a sudden he's disappeared. Now I'll just start increasing my circle, looking and looking farther and looking farther. Now, if you want a 10-pointer and you shoot a 4, right? That's like, you won't get to California by getting off in New Jersey. That's sort of what it is. You'll have to have the discipline to continue looking and not being discouraged by whatever circumstances are going on. This is what happens to a lot of hunters, is they get discouraged when they see a truck parked at their spot, or they get discouraged because they saw there's a deer down there that could have been theirs that was at the check station. Don't let those things get to you, because every year, all the big racks that are on the shop walls of all the taxidermy studios everywhere, a lot of them were beautiful deer the year before, and they made it through. There's always lots of good big deer around in a lot of good places. Depending on what you're looking for, you can adjust and get ready for that. And then as soon as you're not seeing it anymore, you need to widen your circle and move. And that adaptability and movability is something you really want to stick with. Don't be afraid of that.
Okay, so what I want to do right now is we've kind of been slowly shifting towards the Q&A side of things. So I just want to do a nice little like wrap up package of this concept before we move on to like letting you guys take the floor for a Q&A, and you can open it up to whatever you guys want to talk about. So real quick, let's just kind of do a quick little wrap up of the point of this and how to pick the prime spot at the prime time and increase the odds of success, right? So the first thing that we want to do, I'm left-handed, so I'm coming over here. The thing that we want to do is set up what we like to call, that we just invented today, is what we call a hunter profile, right? I'm not sure how well you can see that. Can you see that? I gotta trim my nose hairs, they're tickling my nose. They drive me nuts. Okay, so a hunter profile is gonna be all the stuff that you have for your individual situation, right? You have your hunting style, right? This is gonna be your method. It's gonna be your modality of how you wanna get a buck, whether it's stands, saddles, whatever.
Implement.
Yep, so we're gonna do method. And then we're gonna have implement, is rifle, bow, etc.
Muzzle, right?
Right?
Yep.
And then after that, we're gonna have timing. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna have when. We're gonna have how much. Right? How specific do you have to be? If you only have a week, you probably should start putting in some preseason work. You probably should start laying your strategy out a little bit more, because you have less chance to fly by the seat of your pants and get it done. We do a ton of fly by the seat of your pants. And when we're really relaxed about it and we don't really care that much, we don't tend to shoot a lot of deer, right? When we get serious about shooting deer and we start actually laying things out and we think about it, we put a little strategy together, we put a profile together, we kill deer like that.
And we adjust our timing to go with that strategy, right? You can be doing the right thing, but if you do it at the wrong time, it's still wrong.
Season dates, and this also brings us to the rut. So where are the deer? What is the deer's timing of what, when, how they're feeling, how they're moving, right? So the rut plays into all of this, but that has a lot to do with your season dates and when you're gonna hunt. Right.
Now, the other thing that you're going to want to consider is like how you bonus onto what you're currently doing. Whatever you're currently doing in the way you hunt, you say, how can I add to that? If during the middle of the day, I don't feel like I'm going to be seeing anything. I'm mostly a stand hunter, and I hunt mornings and evenings and this and that. Well, why don't you take the middle of the day and utilize that and go find a new spot, right? What can I do that'll enhance my be a bonus to the way I'm hunting to give me more success and to maximize what I've got going on during the day? right? So you study the history of the area where you're hunting or the new area you're thinking about checking out. You're also gonna maybe try a different method of hunting. If you're mostly a stand hunter and you've got a few minutes and it's the middle of the day and there's this cornfield I saw a buck in, and you get two of your buddies and you go walking through the cornfield in the middle of the day and you drive it down towards the end where they seem to be, and you drive that cornfield and a buck comes out at the end of that soybean field or whatever, and you get a chance to do it and you end up shooting a deer during the middle of the day in a place that you don't really care about and you didn't mess up your good spot, and you can make a bonus run of some kind, do it. I don't know how many times we've just been driving around with four of us in the rig, and I'm saying to myself, this is stupid for all of us to be throwing all of our eggs in this one basket of looking for a track. Drop me off and I'll cut through these woods and I've got a better chance of enhancing what we've got currently going on. Drop me off, I'll cut through, pick me up over there, and I'll just blast through this chunk of woods and see if there's a track, right? Do whatever you can to enhance what you currently have going on. And you keep asking yourself, what can I do to make this better?
Right. The last and most important thing is to map your wins. And what that means is go back to what we were just talking about earlier. When did I get that nice buck? Where did I shoot him? What did the landscape look like? What were the season dates? What phase of the rut was it? How did I get him? And then when you lay that back out on the landscape and say you have a target buck that's in an area that's similar, but the weather's not quite right, the wind for that day, right? The weather is not playing into it quite yet. Where can I go on the map that replicates and looks similar to that previous success I've had during that window, and go there? Your odds of success are way higher because it shares a similar profile. That spot has a similar profile. Try that.
Also too, study yourself. If you're not too good at shooting and you've got a few hours, plan on a little bit of shooting practice in the middle of the day, especially archery equipment, muzzle loaders. Those are the two things that we probably don't practice a great lot on. The bow may get practiced more than the rifle or the muzzle loader.
It's harder to be good at it.
Right? If you extend your season and you say, okay, I didn't have anything here, I'm planning on shooting them with a bow and then finishing up with a rifle, but my muzzle loader is out there just in case, and I don't always do it that much, but I've got a few minutes. Well, dig the muzzle loader out and shoot it a little bit, right? The better you are and the better you know it, the better you'll do. Absolutely.
So one of the things we're gonna do is we're gonna hop into Q&A. So that's how to make a hunter profile and how to use it to find your best hunting spot for your individual situation, and to have it be a dynamic thing that you can use as a blueprint to then overlay, and you can have it be this little adaptable thing. At some point, we'd like to build like just a calculator where you just input these things, you select from what's there, and it just says hunt this area at this time, this season dates on this weather, and it makes this like if-then thing. And of course that won't work perfectly all the time because nature's a dynamic thing, but we want to open this up to Q&A. I'm gonna make a email kind of slide presentation sort of thing where I can send this stuff out as notes, as a little, almost like a little like mini, I wanna say like PowerPoint kind of thing. This will obviously, the replay for this is gonna be on YouTube forever, so you can watch that again. But we're gonna make some stuff so we can send it directly to you. If you guys want that, after we're done here, you can just go over to mountaindeer.com and subscribe to our email list, our blog or whatever, and I'll make a blog about this and I'll send it to you guys if you want that, if there's something you're interested in. So we're gonna open it up to Q&A, and as long as that wants to go, we'll rip. If you guys are all set and you're happy, feel free to go back to enjoying your Sunday. If you're ecstatic and you love this and you want more, drop some questions down in the comments, and Dad will do his best to answer them. You can take it wherever you want to go, as long as it's not about any particular drama, either political or social, going on. We're trying to keep this deer hunting and keep it something good to talk about.
I know so far with us this winter, we've gotten quite a bit of snow here. For the last 10 or 15 years, Vermont's had relatively mild winters, and we're getting a good one this year. It's almost up to my waist outside of the shop right here, and it's real deep, like belly hung kind of snow. So our deer are definitely doing some struggling right now for sure. Haven't had a crust yet, so that part is somewhat good, but there is a little tiny bit of one about boot deep. So this is the winter that we've been sort of dreading a little bit. It's been below zero quite a bit. So that's made it a little bit tough, and I'm sure in areas where you guys don't get the snow, you don't have to worry about it so much, but the Vermont Fish and Wildlife is putting out some deer rule regulation changes, and we're trying to adjust a little bit. So that's upcoming, and that'll be something in the future here for sure.
Eminem says, what is your opinion about camouflage face masks? Do you guys think it provides some extra reaction time? The local nature photographers and predator hunters here really like those. What are your things about face camo, face paint, things like that?
If you're within certain distances, absolutely, it'll make a huge difference.
Especially
I know bow and arrow, it was a big deal for quite a while there, especially when we weren't going up the tree very far. Now that people can get a little bit higher, and especially if they're using crossbows, it's probably not quite as big a deal. I think it plays a lot to your energy as well, and if you're really chill, it helps like crazy. Casey with that great big buck was really chill, and he's a chill dude anyway, and that helps like crazy. When you're intense, animals feel that kind of stuff. So do your best, especially bow hunting, to not be real intense, because just like the dog watching somebody come down the street 100 yards away, when they're an intense person, the dog starts right in barking. Animals feel your presence and your energy like crazy, and when they come in and they really feel something and your heart's going berserk and you're really intense and I'm gonna get you kind of thing, oh, the animals pick up on that. Keep it real chill, and of course keep your movement down. Movement is the biggest thing, more than just like what they might pick out. Movement is huge, and keeping it nice and easy and slow and steady is good.
Do you guys use, this is Steve Denoyer. Hopefully I'm not butchering your name. Do you guys use hunt stand or deer cast hunt-wise for weather patterns and suspected deer movement days? We use that a little bit. We've been paying attention more to that stuff in recent years.
Also, too, Big Buck Registry
Yep,
has
they always put that out.
like a deer
Cast.
day cast kind of thing where they're saying how much it is. I have always, for the longest time, and especially back before all this digital stuff came out and you had to read everything, and Field and Stream and Outdoor Life would always put out sonnular tables, like when the fishing was really good and you'd have a poor day, a good day, and an excellent day, and they would rate it on moon movement and stuff like that. Those days when it said fishing was poor, it actually was. Most of the time it was bluebird kind of weather. And I was like, man, that fishing table says Thursday's going to be the best day. And it actually was. Well, the more I studied it, the more I found out that it was a transition in moon phase. And oftentimes it was unsettled weather during a transition in moon phase. One of the things that I found is, especially here in New England, is that in general, we have, like in most of the US as far as that goes, we have 3-day weather patterns. The weather will come in, say at noon on a certain day. The weather will change over, and then it'll be in transition into sun. And that'll last for a day, day and a half, and then it'll turn into something else. Like some clouds will move in, you'll get a front or something. Whenever the moon phase is changing, you have unsettled weather. That's one of the things that you can depend on fairly steadily. And whenever the unsettled weather comes, it'll be a transition from sun to snow, or from sun to rain, or from snow in high pressure into low pressure, and it'll be windy. So like I always wanted to hunt moon phase changes, and most of the time that's when it was the very best. And then last quarter always seemed to be really good in the center of it, and not so much at the ends of it, even though there was transition. And whenever it was transition, you wanted to be out there. I also found that with turkey hunting too. Whenever the weather was going from rain to sun, or from sun to rain, that's when I saw lots of game. And a lot of times, if I kept track of that as well, like we were talking about keeping track of your hunting success, check on you can always check on what the weather was and what the moon was for that time. And that's real important. And as soon as there's a change of some kind, rainy day buck, right?
Yep.
There was a change. You
The
could
day
see,
before the rain, sunshine buck.
yes,
Yep.
you can see the change in us when that weather showed up. We didn't really like the way the wind was howling, right? If you watch the rainy day buck video and you see our mood and see the way we had changed because the weather had changed and how all the game had changed and the movement patterns of the game had changed, that's probably more important than a lot of the rest of it. And I would always do the same thing as a farmer, right? We were haying. We would always hay during the center part of that moon phase and not at the ends of the moon phase when it was changing from one to the other, because it was unsettled weather and your hay would get wet.
That's right.
Right?
Ward Outdoors, do you all use the 7mm mag in the Ruger M77? I just picked one up and it doesn't have the paddle stock. Awesome, congrats. It's a kick-ass gun. Love it. Dad uses, obviously you guys know that Dad uses Lightning, the M77. It's actually right over there. Do you want to grab it? You want to bring the gun over? Have people take a peek at it? Ryan uses the exact same rifle, the same stage. His is stainless as well. I have one of these that I use. That's the Hawkeye. It has like the powder coat finish. We run paddle stocks on all of our Rugers, and but that's just us. Casey uses a 7mm 08 pump. Uses a Remington, and Jimmy uses a Remington 30-06. That's what he uses. And I actually just picked up a 7mm PRC, so I'll probably hunt with that this coming season because it's a phenomenal gun.
Yeah, we got a video.
We got a video coming out about that, so stay tuned for a rifle update. Those things are pretty sweet.
And the 7 PRC seems to be a pretty good round. I mean, it's pretty much equal to or just a hair better because of the length of the bullet, and the spin is a little bit greater for like ballistic coefficient. It does seem to be a whisker better by the numbers, even though probably we won't be able to tell a great lot of difference.
We will at
But
1,000 yards.
We'll see. So we'll get to do a little bit of practice. We're going to definitely do a lot of shooting this summer, and we're going to want to get better at that.
Eric Anderson, Taylor, you're left-handed. Do you use a left-handed rifle? Mr. Rifles are all left-handed. No, I'm left-handed. I write left-handed, and I do a lot of things left-handed. But I play guitar right-handed. I shoot right-handed. I shoot my bow right-handed because I learned from a lefty that was forced to be right-hand. So I just learned everything right-handed.
Kind of ambidextrous.
It also goes with the fact that I'm right-eye dominant. So it's my shooting eye is this eye. So it just made it a little bit easier for me. And when we learned to shoot, one of the things Dad had us do was he had us do the exercise where you pick your hand up and you look through it, and then you close one eye and then you close the other. And when you close the eye, if you perceptively see your hands move, that tells you what eye you were using when you picked your hands up. So that's a way to find out that like which eye is dominant, and based on that, that's kind of the way that you should be shooting and handling a gun. I can shoot a gun left-handed. I'm obviously not nearly as good at it. Casey's a lefty who shoots left-handed, and he's pretty talented marksman. So we kind of have that. We're all kind of somewhere mixed in the middle. Dad shoots right-handed. He's kind of has a proclivity to left hand, but he's the left eye dominant, which is why the both eyes open is kind of like one of the things that he loves to do.
The other thing too, like if you're able to do a lot of tracking, you're going to want to do your rifle practice a lot of offhand. Get the gun dialed in and then start shooting offhand as much as you can. One of the things that I did a lot too to improve my offhand is I did a lot of dry firing. You can pick up one of those dry firing shells, put that in your gun, and it'll be easier on your firing pin. And you do a lot of just lift it up, point and shoot, and get used to like the moment the gun goes off as you're wiggling and you're trying to hold it steady. I would pick a nail on a wall and I would just keep going click, 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 click. And I would spend my time knowing exactly where the crosshair was when the click went off. And then as I practiced that and I got used to that trigger pull, it made my offhand shooting really good. One of the reasons you want to be a good offhand shooter is if you need to be quick and you can't mess around and move over to a tree, or a deer catches you and you're walking and you go, and now you've got to make the most of it. or you have to see something, move to a new location in a hurry and then shoot. So practice offhand shooting, practice run to a position and then fire too. Practice those things like crazy. It'll make you better. The boys, I would put the 22 to them. The boys, I made them shoot 22 till they were bored with it. And then I made them cover up their sights so they had no sights, and they would just take the gun and point it, boom, and get instinctive shooting down, especially at close quarters. And now when they jump something at close quarters, they don't even have to aim. You just pull a gun up, point at it, boom, and just shoot it, right? And when you get used to it and you do that much, in 22, you can afford to do that. If you're at a gravel pile or like a gravel pit of some kind, and you shoot and you can see the bullet hit, and you learn to just point it and boom, and point it and boom. You'll get so good with it after a while that hitting a deer will be a piece of cake. You'll be able to just point and shoot at a milk jug on a bank at 30 yards, and you won't even have to aim. So get used to practicing that. And of course, I had a 22 that mirrored what they were using for a deer rifle. So when they got so used to that, and I would put a brick to them, and I'd say, when that brick's gone, I'll give you another brick. And they would just keep shooting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rounds until they really got good at it. And now they can just pull up and do it. And what a difference that made. Most people don't shoot enough. And of course, it's expensive now. It's big money.
Do you guys do a lot of bow hunting too?
I used to bow hunt a great deal. The taxidermy really got me. Moose hunting became very popular, and when we had a huge moose herd, my taxidermy business was so busy in October from the moose that I just didn't have as much time as I wanted to go bow hunting, and I backed off from it quite a bit. I'd love to go back to it, and I'd love to do more of it, but it just like between you guys and your tree service and me just being busy, and I have to give up some time somewhere, I just assume not be around home and hunt. I just as soon go to Maine and spend my time away just deer hunting with nothing else on my mind, and not the family and the business and all that other stuff going on. I like the separation. Just if I'm gonna deer hunt, I'm just gonna go do it. The other thing too is that if I'm gonna kill something, I just want it dead. I'm one of those guys that just, if you're gonna shoot something, just kill it. And rifle, that's what you do. You just get out and kill it. A lot of guys, especially now that Vermont is having, we have our two valleys in the state are kind of overpopulated with deer. It's been that way for a while, and they'd like to get the herd under control in those areas, and they're thinking about opening up rifle season for those does just to get it done. We just need to bring it back under control, and we're due for some really some hard winters are going to show up, and we've got one already. And with a big herd and some hard winters, boy, you want to keep that deer carrying capacity lined up. And Nick seems to feel, our deer biologist seems to feel that we really need to get this done, and we don't want to mess around anymore, and we just need to. So he's considering and put it out to the public about rifle hunting for does, and I think that we may really need to. And New Hampshire's kind of already invented the wheel, and maybe we ought to follow that a little bit. I don't see any real super danger kind of stuff, especially if everyone's mindful of it when they go out in the woods. I mean, we shoot guns all the time, and I don't think that's that big a deal, but we're definitely thinking about revamping some of the deer rules in Vermont. And if you have an opinion about that, boy, you want to go to those meetings.
Yep. As far as the bow hunting thing, I've been doing more and more bow hunting, but I'm just not really I'm just not really someone who likes to sit. I like to go through the woods. I like to explore. I like to adventure. And I kind of just get a little itchy. And if I hang out in a spot too long, most of the time during deer season, I work so hard, up so late, and I sleep so little that I just want to pass out. So I figure the best use of my time is to kind of still hunt and just find spots to sit down for a minute and pick a decent spot. And maybe that has led to some of the lack of success in bow hunting, but one of my aspirations is to track. To find a perfect track, perfect day, take the bow out and shoot a big buck on the ground with a bow in the big woods. That's one of the things I'd like to do. And I've just been doing more and more of that. But Eminem, can you elaborate on the cautious walk/behave like a deer trick a little bit? Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes you really need to move in the woods to catch up and reach a good spot, but when do you switch over from like moving, behaving, kind of like being like a deer, going easy versus like just rocking and rolling?
Well, part of that will be the amount of how noisy the woods are. If the woods are fairly noisy, number one, and I mean noisy by like the deer can't hear you very well and you can't hear them very well. It's windy, it's raining, it's snowing, it's crunchy, and like there's a brook around you, like noisy conditions where the deer can't hear you all that well. You're being careful about the cadence of calling and what you're walking and whatnot. It'll be, especially if there is a little bit of snow on the ground, say there's a crust or something, it'll be more important when you think you're closer to the deer. And it will be less if he's just going across the hardwoods, or he's on a logging trail and he's just walking and he's holding a line and going straight. You won't have to be real careful about that the way you would if he got off that trail and did a 90 and turned into some evergreens. Now your cadence will be more important, right? Because you could be closer. When you think you're within hearing range of the deer, now you're going to be more careful about it. If that's a help. Also too, you'll have to be in general more careful if the woods are really quiet yet loud, right? The deer can hear you from 200 yards away because it's oak leaves 6 inches thick.
Oh God,
You're just gonna have, yeah, New Hampshire.
Oh God, New Hampshire.
You're gonna have to be that way all the time. There'll be lots of needing to keep the cadence up because you could very well run into a deer right there. So whenever you think you're within hearing range of one. And two, the deer that could be listening to you. The older and the wiser they are, whether it's a doe or a buck, the more patient they are. They hear one little stick snap and they'll sit there chewing their cud and listening to that spot, and they'll just keep listening. And when they finally see something move over there, or they hear a couple more confirming sounds that aren't quite what they like, won't take long, they'll be up and out of there before you get a chance to maybe find out that they're there.
Any advice for finding deer in big woods with minimal to no logging activities, such as White Mountain National Forest? This is Andrew. Andrew, transition types, where the woods change. Get on the map. We'll go back to our success map here, and we'll say, I know this is a little marked up, so you have to kind of like peer through it a little bit, but where the steep mountains topography changes, right where the topography lines get close together, and then when they open up dramatically, right there is a steep transition point where a road comes in and they had to do some clearing. There'll be woods change types. So in New England, like White Mountain National is in New Hampshire. Yep. When you're looking at the woods and you look at a summertime photo and you see the different colors of tree types, that's where the forest changes. So where it goes from those big hardwoods and then all of a sudden it gets really steep and there's water down in, along those steep pathways at the top of them where it kind of flattens off, there's gonna be runways. There'll be sign there. Dad and I actually 2 years ago, when I broke Dad's muzzleloader, we were in New Hampshire for muzzle, and him and I were just hunting these transition types where the topography gets like really drastic, where it either drops down and meets something flat, or where a brook has carved up and it kind of gets swampy, nasty, but then it gets nice on the edge of that. Just hunt those edges and look for sign. And as you string the sign together, you can start backing up and saying, okay, on the map, I found a rub here, I found a rub here, I found a spot here. And then you say, okay, those type of woods have sign in them right now. Let's look at the map even farther back and see if we can find other spots that look the same.
If you go to like Massachusetts, or as you get out of the main part of the mountains and you get like in the rest of America, seriously, because it's totally different. What we have mountain-wise and what the rest of the country has aren't the same. Our mountains are unique to New England. They're quite a bit different. One of the things you'll find as you go more south and more towards the ocean, and it's a little bit flatter, say Massachusetts, or the majority of New York, what you'll have is like drainages with steep gullies that will go out, and they'll all come together. All these drainages all come together. Now, some of the drainages may be dry. There might not be water coming down them, but you can tell over time that this little valley, there's been water over the years that has come down through there, and it's just like this steep gully. And there'll be a top shelf and another top shelf on the sides of that gully, and the deer will go up and down the gullies and then peel off to one side and lay on them. So you may want to hunt each side of those, and meanwhile looking across the gully, a lot of them are only a couple hundred yards. across, and sometimes it might be 100. They might narrow as they get near the top, and the deer will go around and then come onto this. I would check those tops and the bottom of the gully like crazy for any sign that's along there. We just barely, I do have a new favorite knife. Taylor, my Montana knife.
I'm looking for it.
It's in the,
Here's your
underneath my
previous.
radio.
Here's your previous.
It's right underneath my radio on the shelf right there. I have an NTF, one, I got an NTF banquet, and I've been carrying this knife here for years and years. It's kind of a club, and
It's huge.
it has scratched my scope a little tiny bit. I put it on my gun belt. I have a gun belt, ammunition belt, and I set it on that. That way it's all together as one. But
These are the knives that when Dad and I went out to Montana and we went with Sig and we did their training out there. We actually got these knives as kind of like a gift. It was something that they had for us. It's
That one's still
Montana
dirty.
Knife Co. This one's still dirty. But this is a ridiculously nice knife. It is so light, it is so durable, it's so well balanced. It's a razor blade and stainless steel, beautiful finish. Montana Knife Co. They make good
Kevlar.
stuff. There's probably crazy expensive. I don't know how much these cost. It's a really nice knife. They give you a really sweet Kydex sheath with it. It clicks in, it stays locked. This is now my new everyday carry knife for deer hunting. Dad has the same. The way it clipped and it didn't quite fit with the regular setup that we have because we all use gun belts. When I carry my cross, I don't use a gun belt. I have magazines. So I just tuck this in my pouch, my beagle, stuff it in a backpack because you only need it when you're gutting a buck or something like that or an emergency. So it doesn't need to be at the ready. But what I did was I actually hooked it to my belt with a sideways clip and I had it mounted this way on my back. So I could just reach out, I push it and it could pull it right around to the front. It stayed locked, never had a problem. So far I love them, but
Dad's definitely like the biggest knife you want to lug with you.
Yeah.
It's so big. I don't want something big just to gut a deer out or whatever. But I like a really sharp knife at camp. And a million times we've been to camp and camp knives are terrible. And if I've got to cut a chunk of meat up and I want to do a nice job, I like a decent sharp knife.
Yeah.
There are times when you want a really good, decent knife.
radios.
But you don't need it, like for gutting out a deer. Yeah, I could do it with a razor blade if I needed to. So that's like no big deal. But
Here's one. We might as well hit this one because it's funny. Is Rodney 50s and Taylor 20s? Yes, by so close of a margin. Dad and I are both within 2 weeks. Birthday in April this year. I'll be turning 30 and he'll be turning 60 this year.
yeah, so it's a pretty good.
So we're
good amount. We're a
so
little older than
we're
you
right
thought.
on. We're right on.
Yeah.
But yes, radios. We just carry regular, FRS, right? Isn't that what we carry? Just regular junk radios. We kind of have like a hodgepodge. Jimmy's got this brand, Dad's got this brand. None of our radios, we don't have any nice radios. And that's one of the things that we actually ask people all the time. Like, if you have any good radios or any suggestions, let us know. Because our stuff, like, it seems like when you watch the videos, the times when we communicate well, we leave that, I'll leave that in because it makes you understand the video a little bit more. But the times when we're sitting there and it's, and we're like, and you just put it in your pocket and you're like, whatever. that doesn't get in the video, but we spend more time struggling with our radios than not. So if you guys have any recommendations for us on radios, please drop those down below. What do you use?
We've kind of tried every brand. Like, there's no one brand that's like perfect, and some are definitely better than others. The old Midlands were really good. We used Midland for a long time.
Midlands used to be sweet.
And Jimmy's still got a couple that he's milked along, and they've lasted quite a while. But like, they all stink.
Yeah, they do.
And the other thing is, they don't make a good radio. The good radio is the phone.
Yeah, if you can use it.
If you can use your phone, that is the very best radio you'll ever get. Nothing beats it. And we actually have cell service in a few places now where we never used to have any.
Yeah.
And so cell service has improved, especially out in the bigger woods. And I also like having cell service and the phone for the maps. I use it quite a bit instead of the Onyx. Taylor has Onyx, and
I love Onyx.
Ryan
I
has
waited
it.
too
Jimmy
long.
has it now. I don't have it. I'm still fighting it. I don't like need it, want it. Doesn't matter all that much. But this year I did use maps quite a bit because we were in a really flat, swampy,
Yeah.
kind of nasty area that I had no knowledge of, and I was just totally winging it. And I got into this stuff that was a wall, and it was like a quarter mile of rabbit jail that was really, 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 really bad. I mean, really bad. Like you had to shove your body through it. It was that bad. And I was like, I'm sick of this. And after, 500-600 yards of that, I was like, I'm sick of this, and I don't want more of it if it's going to get worse or it's going to get super wet, boggy, like sink out of sight, because nothing is in that stuff. And I didn't want to get pinched in too bad, and I whipped out the phone and I just went to maps, and I saw where I was, and I could look at the satellite imagery and say, oh, and I faced the phone in the direction I needed to go, and I said, oh, there's a logging road 150 yards over that way, and right through and busted right onto it. It's wonderful, right? The availability of satellite, if you're not taking advantage of that, oh my God, that is just, nothing beats it.
Okay. Have the New England states received more pressure with the channels like yours giving more info on how to track deer? Our state and Michigan, so much pressure, but it's more due to the population than hunting. Has New England received more pressure? I don't think so. I think you're just seeing evidence of what's out there now. Now that people are using the information on how to hunt, how to get a big buck, how to be efficient, how to do it well, you're seeing states like Vermont cough up so many more 200-pounders. Their bow seasons are, just the availability of information is just making people more successful. But I don't think that it's changed like the amount of people coming to New England to hunt. I think that like the hunting elsewhere is just as good, if not probably more likely to be successful in other states. That it's not like people from Ohio are like, dude, we got to go to Vermont. They got some slammers up there.
Right.
Did you see that thing that dude posted? It was crazy, right?
No,
like,
that's not happening.
I don't think that's happening. I just think you're seeing more people documenting it, more people sharing photos. We're creating like a more of a rich culture around the sharing of information and success and failure. You're seeing more just communication. You're probably not seeing more pressure in New England. Now, that doesn't mean that there's the same amount of people tracking, because I think that people are seeing the efficiency of tracking and how it can be such a useful skill. They're probably taking up tracking more. And if anything, you're gonna see more people that are in the Midwest migrate towards like Michigan, Montana. They're gonna go north to where they have snow and they're gonna hunt. But I don't think they're gonna drive all the way to New England just to do that. Plus, like, our stuff really doesn't reach out that far. We don't really have that big of a following elsewhere in the country. Like people from Tennessee, Virginia, you guys that have been following us for forever, Michigan, Montana, there's not that many. And this is still kind of like a
Niche.
it's still kind of a niche hunting style that not a lot of people engage in.
The other thing too is like whether you're comparing it to the recent past, yes, there's probably since
More,
in the last 5 or 6 years, there's more people probably jumping in and doing what we're doing in the last 5 or 6 years.
But the hunting
in the style, but the overall population, if
Pressure
you look
has.
at like 25 years ago, Vermont had 125,000 hunters, and now we're down to 68,000. We're killing the same amount of deer, so we're more efficient. We have half the people doing the same job. So they're definitely better at what they do.
The pressure's increased, but the amount of people hunting probably hasn't.
Right, and the pressure's only increased like in the last little bit, and in general, not overall, it hasn't increased. So like if you're in Michigan, you'd have to look at like what your license sales used to be and what they are now, and help that determine it a little bit. Right. You may have more people going, the Onyx makes people more secure, and they're more likely to go back there.
And take the risk.
Also too, there'll be, with social media, there's a spreading out of hunters because you might have never considered going to Maine, and now you're thinking about it.
So maybe,
you might not
but
have considered
it's
going
probably
to
not that much.
Montana, right? So like even Colorado has backed off on elk tags.
Yeah, it's
because
hard
so
to
many people are thinking, well, I could go to Colorado. They're over the counter.
Yeah.
I'll go elk hunting.
We did.
So there is some spreading out of hunters, across the landscape.
It's hard to tell. I'm sure the pressure has increased a ton locally, and you're getting more people to travel just because you know, there's more of a culture. People are seeing it. Maybe, I don't know. Hard to tell. When you're walking, do you try to sound more like a deer and less like a human when walking? And any tips? If you watch my day 11 video where I had the coyotes come up point blank, in that I kind of talk about some of the walking tips to decrease the sound when you're actually moving through the woods. So people have just this big crunch kind of step. And one of the things I do is I like to step lightly and then kind of like scuff my toe after my final step. So you step, scuff, step, scuff, step, scuff, step. And it makes it sound like 4 feet. And the second one sound lighter because it's almost like a deer when their back feet step in their front track. So it's a less of a crunch. So it's big crunch, little crunch, big crunch, little crunch. But you know, kind of. So as long as you can do that and it's not big, like those two sounds alert you differently. If I'm like, you just hear that. So you try to just walk lightly and walk a little bit with more of a step kind of cadence, and that'll help. But really, the sound is what it is. There's not much you're gonna do about it. You just try to walk as quietly as you can, but don't stress about it too much.
Less Jurassic Park.
Yeah, let's go. The water cup. The water cup.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I've had poor luck with GoPro cameras in cold weather. Any recommendations? They work fine on my charter fishing boat in the summer when regarding batteries. Just batteries in general don't do well in the cold.
Keeping them warm.
We just keep a crazy volume, and I just keep them close to my chest. So if you have any like interior pockets, if you have any like harnesses, like a vinyl harness or anything you could wear like on the inside of your coat, anything to keep the batteries close to your body warmth or like in your like pants pocket, something, and then just swap them out. Running cameras when they're cold and having them out and exposed just sucks down the battery anyway. Other than just trying to keep them close to you, there's really not too much you can do.
Keep some warm.
Charge them fully and then stop. And try not to
Overcharge.
try not to have them be dead for a long period of time. It's like a car battery. You want to use the battery and deplete, charge it up, and don't let it sit, dead for a long period of time. Otherwise, it won't hold a charge when you come around to use it. Like some of our batteries, if we don't use them throughout the year and it go back next deer season, they're trash. We just have to chuck them.
The other thing you want to remember too, with all of filming, is that you really recognize when you're going to need it. If you're tracking and he's on the highway, you don't need the battery all that much, and it can be cold and it's no big deal. But if all of a sudden he does a double, takes in the view, turns and does a 90 degrees, you want to make sure you got a fresh battery. He starts feeding and going easy, make sure you got a fresh battery. When those Kodak moments you feel are pretty sure to happen, have the camera running and have that fresh battery in there all the time. Staying ahead of that and paying attention to when you really are going to need it, that's probably more important.
Eminem again, dude, you're holding it down. You and Steve, you guys are holding it down. Could you make a how-to video on how to remove the lower legs and possibly the skull if YouTube allows it? It's kind of tricky for new hunters, and there are some tricks that make it easier. We have a video on caping a deer head, so like pulling the hide off and removing the skull plate with the horns attached. We actually have that on the YouTube channel. It's how to cape a deer head.
It sounds like he's talking about tubing the legs too.
Yes, the removing the legs part. If you're tubing them or whatever, I think we have that on the regular how to cape a deer.
I don't normally
video.
tube them anyway.
No, you just
cut
go
them
up
down
the
the
brown and
back.
white. Yeah, watch the how to cape a deer for a shoulder mount, just the whole thing, and then watch the head, and that might answer both of those questions.
It really doesn't. You don't have to have the front leg in a tube. You don't have to do that, because no matter what, if it's a shoulder mount of some kind, you never need that back part of that skin right there. And that brown and white that goes up the back, just take your knife and cut off that front knee and then go right up the brown and white hairline. Just cut right up through that. Stick your knife, turn it upside down, and go right up that brown and white on the leg and follow the brown and white. It's a perfect line for you to follow with your knife and go right to the ring cut around the chest cavity and pull it down. Don't bother tubing it. It is no reason to keep it in a tube. It's a lot of work. work and it's not worth it. You don't need it. Every one of those, the first thing I do is I open a cape, throw it on the flushing table, and I cut them tubes open. It's the first thing I do. Then I can hold it nice and flat, put it on my flushing wheel, and peel all the stuff off it, and there's no reason to keep it in the tube.
If once you get the hide off and you want to like remove the actual joint, you just have to go in and you have to start cutting those little tendons and go around it, and then you have to kind of like almost like break the joint open and then finish the ligaments that are inside that hold the bones together. That part can be a little tricky, and you just have to work at it, go slow, get your knife tip in there, and it's just practice. It takes time to do that. Is it, Glenn, what's going on, Glenn? Is early season a better time to try than late season? Debating and switching up my time to see if that's why I'm not seeing deer. Late season and early season both come with their challenges. Early season doesn't tend to have the kind of compliant weather that we want. It tends to be really warm. They're not circulating yet. There's not a lot of deer movement. So you may have to put in a little bit more pre-season time to kind of find those localized kind of little, what do they call bucks? The buck's core, right?
Yeah.
People refer to it as his core.
Right.
So finding those kind of cores and then trying to catch them on the outskirts of those things or slide in there. It takes more work to do and to really hit them early season. If you're talking like bow season, it takes a lot more labor, a lot more strategy to kind of figure them out.
And go slow and easy.
And you go real easy, and you play the weather a ton. And if the weather's not quite right, it's like you don't have time for it.
If you remember, you think you're trying to sneak up on something that's paying attention and something that isn't paying attention. And your odds are tough when they're real relaxed and they're at home in their little living room, so to speak, and you come along, they're going to pick up on that. Even if they didn't actually see you and you just walked through, they're picking up on the fact you were there. So that early season time, ooh, be careful right then. Some of the guys that'll go up, they'll be the carefulest they can. They'll find where a big buck is hanging out. Okay, he's on this mountainside. Now take the cameras and find out exactly where he is during the daylight hours, and then do it without disturbing him to keep it to an absolute minimum. Find where he is, put out a plethora of cameras in that spot, and then find out exactly where he is, and then only hunt there when the conditions are just right. And then if you have 6 or 7 of those kind of scenarios all planned out by your early season scouting, now you can go right on this day, slide right in there, and this day, it's not the right day for that one, but over here the wind will be good, I'll do this. And you'll have 5 or 6 options, and you can go straight to it. And that early season, to get the big one, first thing, early season, you gotta be careful, because they'll pick up on it and they'll move, and it'll all fall apart on you.
Mark, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you. Have a good day. Enjoy PA. Good luck shed hunting. What do you guys use? Want to grab the 2 rifles? What do you guys use for scopes while tracking? These 2 scopes are going to be kind of a representation of the 2 different ideas about how we hunt. Casey is the only one out of our crew who uses peep sights or iron. He has a ghost ring with a pin on the end. That's what he uses. One of the scopes that I've recently fallen in love with is a 1-6. This is obviously on my Sig Cross, but I would recommend any one power and up, just for both eyes open. Because one of the things that's so great about this is being able to pick it up and get movement. And it's a quick acquisition scope. So it's for picking it up, quickly acquiring the target and being able to do something with it. This is like a premium scope. I obviously didn't pay for it because it's very expensive. I really recommend it. I love it. It has the variable red dot. It's got all of my windage. It's got my drops built in it. It only goes up to 6 power, which isn't a ton, especially when you start getting out like 75 yards and you want to confirm antlers. I like to have a little bit more power. So if you maybe like a 1-9, if you can do like a 1-9, that'd be sweet. But I love this optic. It's phenomenal. Dad uses a Leopold Vari X3, and this is a 3-9, right? 3-9?
Yep.
Yeah. And this is kind of the more standard style that we use.
40 or 44 millimeter.
Yes.
That probably says.
Yeah. It was actually,
But
yeah.
yeah,
It's all
that old girl's
scratched
got
up.
she's got some mileage on it.
Yeah, a 3-9 is a great scope for tracking. It's opened up enough for close, anything inside, 50 yards or so. 3 powers is fine. The magnification is not too much to where you can still shoot both eyes open. Because when you're tracking and the deer's on his feet and you're right there and you're close and he starts moving, using both eyes open and having the biggest field of view in order to get on target and shoot. Because this is New England, you only get so much time, and the deer population is so low that you every now and then you have to shoot at a deer that's moving, be it walking or whatever. So this is more the standard style that we use. It's only been recently that we started using different scopes like the 1-to-6 for SIG. But this is a scope that all of us have had. We've all run some kind of 3 to something on our
3 to
regular-
9.
Yeah, on our regular rifles. And he's been using that same scope for how long, Dad? How long you been using that one?
Jesus, long. Hate to think about how long it's been. And those guys out west would probably like that whiskey from SIG. The other thing is, if you end up going with iron sights, and it's mostly up close, if you're like a New England hunter, or you're in the brush, you're in the Midwest, in Minnesota or whatever, and you're hunting a lot of thicks, and it's short shots, and it might be bad weather conditions or snow or rain, so you got to keep the scope clean, and you go with, like Casey does in his iron sights, you'll want to do a lot of your extra practice at distance. You'll have to make up for the long shot when you do have to take it. So you want to get good at shooting close and handle that. And when you've mastered that, now move on to shooting longer ranges with those and get used to practicing it so that you know it and you're able to do both. What I did is the other way around. I learned how to shoot up close with that scope at a moving target. And I also, because it's good scope and you're able to shoot a long ways efficiently and effectively, I can shoot a long ways and I can shoot up close, but I had to do a lot of close moving practice with the scope to get good on it. So like you have two ends of the spectrum. If you go with a scope, you want to practice moving and up close with it. The far away will be easy. And the opposite of what Casey has. Far and away is hard, but up close is easy.
He might need binoculars or something.
Right, so like you want to be prepared on both ends, whichever way you go, and then practice the more difficult part with that sighting system.
If you guys like this sort of Q&A thing, if you're digging it, give it a thumbs up, share it with somebody that you think would benefit from this. We're gonna kind of flip around. Hey, Kirk said hit that like button. Nice, appreciate you. We're gonna jump to Eric Anderson's comment, his question real quick because it'll be quick to answer it, and then we're gonna jump back up to fish for us too. Here at home, most taxidermists send their capes out to tanning companies. Does that hold true East States? Yes, most people send their stuff out, but Dad doesn't. We'll let him explain that.
One of the things that's happened kind of since COVID has been like there's been a delay. Most of it started with COVID. It started with the shipping. California changing some of their trucking laws, the ships not being able to get in. A lot of course, everything we have comes from China. So there's a whole bunch of like shipping issues, and it was all like this bottleneck around LA and San Francisco and the ports in the western part, and a lot of the product coming this way. Mackenzie Taxidermy Supply is probably one of the biggest taxidermy suppliers, and of course they buy lots of urethane and they buy lots of tanning solution as well, and all those chemicals were all coming from China. They would all have to enter the ports and get through, and the ports, everything was sitting. Everyone, because of COVID, was going hunting and fishing. Taxidermy just soared. The amount of people that just fished for a month and a half straight during COVID, right? And they ended up catching some giants, and they were like, well, I got my COVID check, I might as well get this thing mounted, right? So there was this huge plethora of taxidermy that happened because of COVID and people being in the outdoors in general. And so Mackenzie ends up buying more and more. They ended up buying like 6 or 7 different companies and being like this monopoly of taxidermy forms and stuff like that. They bought Van Dyke's and a lot of different companies. So they're going at this. And of course, their main facility, even though they have more facilities now and they bought more companies, their main facility was in Granite Quarry, North Carolina. And they needed to get all the chemicals to there, and they were having a hard time getting it done. And then they said, well, let's just send the ship around. So it had to go through the Panama Canal and come into the Chesapeake Bay that direction. And so there was like this delay in all the product getting to where it needed to get. And Even then, Tohigan was one of the biggest whitetail eye producers. They make the glass eyes, and they were having trouble finding help. Mackenzie was having trouble finding help. They ended up hiring a third shift. Things like there was this big delay in things, and of course, a big part of that was the chemicals and the tanning solution. And it very quickly, with the boost in numbers of people wanting things tanned and wanting the urethane, and then the surge in prices because of the delays and all the trucking and shipping cost changes and things like that, things changed quite a bit. And there was like this delay in all those things. So it ended up, of course, I could shift what I did, and I could just do hides for a month and not mount much because I had so many hides to do, right? There was such a plethora of business that there was a shift in what you did and how you did it. And that was like taxidermy industry wide. It was one of those things. And of course, there's a lot of old taxidermists. They could only handle so much. There wasn't as many new people jumping into it. So there was like this demand. So it was like this funny storm, the way the whole thing went down. And we're still trying to recover a lot from that, and even price increases and stuff. And with the delay and the increase in tool costs, it put taxidermists to the point where they were just like, man, I can't handle anymore, and just started shutting it off. And also too, there's a delay in the amount of money you make, so the profits took a dip because you're working on stuff that was 2 years ago, and you made a deal with somebody, and now it's kind of hard to pass on those price increases. It was just this like perfect storm of stuff. So, and I've always done my own tanning for mounts, but when it came to flat hides, rugs and stuff
Big
like that.
cows and big
yeah,
stuff.
big, huge cow hides and all kinds of, especially flat hides. I just flushed them and salted them and sent them out. And then I ended up waiting like everybody else, 18 months. So if you add the tanneries being suddenly worked like crazy. The other thing that worked the tanneries like crazy is all the small farms. The millions of little small goat farms and cow farms and specialty kind of stuff where people were raising their own, and now they've butchered their cow and it has a beautiful hide on it, and they're like, boy, I'd like to tan that. Could we save this? So there was a lot of like, grow your own, save it, use it, make use of the entire animal. So even the greenie kind of movement made an increase in my business. With the antis and all of their, you shouldn't be killing predators anymore. Roadkill increased, and that increased taxidermy business like crazy. When there's lots of dead animals, people see a bobcat on the side of the road and they call and they get a tag for it, and now they want to mount it. So there was an increase in that. There was an increase in nuisance stuff. If people get out of predator hunting a little bit, if people have chickens and now they've had a fisher get after them and they've trapped the fisher and they don't just want to chuck it. If there's an otter in their pond killing all their fish, they trap it. The beavers, so it's this weird kind of storm that's happened to taxidermy. It's been a whole bunch of different things, especially in the last 5 years or so. It's been a huge swing, and people just trying it, people getting new and better at it.
Fish for us, too. Scenario, morning after fresh snow. It's hard to find any track, especially a large one. Yep. You finally pick up a track, but it's a small buck. Which way would you follow the small track? Which way, or would we? Let's do both. I would follow the track the way it's pointed. And would you follow a small track if you can't find a track? Yeah. Well, no.
Depends.
That depends. That's a hard statement because, like, say it's 8:30 and you've been driving since sunup, or you've been tearing through the woods since first light, and you haven't come across anything but a small track. The best place to be is standing on tracks, because deer follow other deer trails. Like you'll walk through the woods, and then other animals that come through the woods after you will get on your back track and walk down it for a ways. And tracks tend to lead to more tracks. But if you're not after a small buck, sometimes it's not very productive to follow a small buck, because you might meet him and then you might shoot him and then you might go home with the one you weren't initially after. That, you kind of have to measure that for your own self. You say, is the risk of tracking down a small buck and potentially saying, you know what, why not? Does that fit into what you want your deer season to be? Is it better to be on tracks versus bare snow? Yes, but if you're not seeing any big buck tracks, it's because you're not where big bucks are. And that seems like a slight oversimplification. It seems pretty obvious, but it's hard to make that call in the moment. I would say feel it out. If you want to be on, if you think that this buck might lead you in the direction that he's pointed, if he's looking like he's going towards good stuff where you might run into other tracks, or the mountain comes down, it's a little saddle and he's kind of headed that way, take it. Because if he's going towards a transition place, you might run into a better track, and if something comes along that's better, you can hop on that. It's better to be on sign than no sign, because at least you have a chance of seeing a small buck, but that's not guaranteed that he'll lead you to something better.
The other thing too that will often happen is guys, especially in big country, will hunt in teams. There'll be 2 guys in a truck or something, and when you hit a good track and somebody jumps out on it, and now the driver heads up the road a little bit, and there's a small buck track, and your buddy's on the bigger one, and you kind of got to be in that area.
Why not?
And there's nothing else to do. Well, yeah, let's take it and go see. You'll probably end up in the same woods, but then again, you never know. And the small one might be able to cut the corner, go right to the doe that the big one's going to end up at, and all of a sudden, the big one steps in front of you. Pow! How many times that's happened? A fair number of times.
5 tracks.
Right, where we jump in the woods and one guy is really kind of doing business and everything's working out, and then somebody else gets in that same chunk of woods because there's some more tracks over here and there's nothing else to do, and then all of a sudden, thunk, and everything comes together, and bang, Rodney's got another one.
Yeah.
I've stepped in front of a few people a few times. You have to be careful about that. If you have a buddy that would be mad about that, no, don't get out. Don't take that track.
Give him
the space. Yeah, some guys need space. Some guys need space. Yeah.
Every now and then
Know your hunting
you'll hunt with a buddy who'll do this, and he'll be like, shoot him. That's who I like to hunt with. He pulls me in front and lets me shoot the big one. I like that. Steve says, what's your favorite state to hunt and why? I'll let you go. Favorite state to hunt?
I like Maine because we have so much room. The area we're in there is probably 250 miles by 250 miles. I mean, it's huge. I don't know how many square miles that is, but that's a lot.
It's around this here.
So like to have, tons and tons and tons of land where you can just go and help yourself and just wander around all you want, or sit for a million hours, do whatever you want. I like the freedom of that. And I don't have anybody saying, oh, it has to have a 15-inch spread and it's got to have so many points. And I make all my decisions myself, and I like to be able to do that. So that's why I like Maine so much.
Your hunting is autonomous.
Yeah, so I can just do it.
Yep.
Even though like I'm far from alone, there's tons and tons of people everywhere. But like I like that best. As I get into smaller chunks of woods, where I don't have a lot of space, I'll get a little discouraged because, everything's looking really good, and then he steps across a bunch of yellow plastic signs, and I can't go anymore, and I get a little bummed by that. Even though I'm not bummed really, but it is like, that can be discouraging. So that part of it, especially when I'm used to hunting like a wolf.
I want to follow the small buck to lead me to a bigger one or other deer, not going to shoot the small buck. Which way? Backtrack or take him towards him? Would you take a backtrack? Well, it's like, no, not, I don't, like,
not usually.
Backtracking typically isn't that useful unless you want to know more about the buck that you're backtracking. If you have a really old track that's a big buck and he comes over himself in a spot where you have a track that's 3 days old and a track that's 2 days old, that's a track that backtracking is not a bad idea, because you're gonna learn more about his loop. Like, let's do this real quick. This is actually, there's a giant that we've never closed the gap on except for maybe once or twice, and this was something that we both did to learn him. So there was this mountain. Oh, that's a useless marker. Here, fuck it. Oh, excuse me, didn't mean to swear there. Chuck that. So there's this mountain, and then there's a saddle, and then it kind of goes up into another, whatever. And then there's a big ravine, a big river, and then this is all, you know, pretty steep down to another end of road, right? And so this buck, I would always come down across the ravine, go up through the cut, work my way here, and I would pick up his track. Now, he would sometimes come this way, he would sometimes come around, but a lot of times, this is the only place where the snow is, where it is on the north side over here. So I know that he would always come down, and he would sometimes do this, but he always funneled right here, right? And if he keeps hitting this same spot, this means that it's part of his loop, especially as I age more and more days of the track. It was probably helpful to use a contrast color, I'm sorry. So, how many junk markers?
I know.
How many junk markers do we have? There we go. If I come along and I get on this buck here, taking the backtrack to find out where his loop is, this is helpful. Because you can say, here are some natural pinch points that I might be able to catch him. Or if you go, oh, he comes up here in beds every time he goes through this notch, right? When Dad and I go out next time, if Dad picks up his track up here, where's he going? He's going right there, right? Knowing those pinch points and seeing where his old tracks overlay, especially if he comes through a whole bunch, that's a great piece of knowledge. But the only way I got that was from backtracking him, because there was one track out here where there was some fresh snow, and when I got in, I saw the old snow. It's like, look at all these old tracks from the same size buck. This is the pinch point, right? And if we catch him fresh, headed up north direction, we know that he's gonna go through here at some point. So sometimes backtracking helps you learn more about the buck you're on. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that either way that you take it, a small buck is gonna bring you to more deer or bigger deer. That's hard to know.
Here's when I would take it to backtrack. Okay, you're driving up a road, and as you come up the road, a buck track comes across it. This side of the road is posted, and you can't hunt it. Now, we don't know anything about this buck, but a giant buck came across and went in there. We drive up and around, try and hook the whole thing, and he doesn't seem to have come out, and he's in there. Okay, he's on this chunk of land today. He's come across like last night.
He's in the no-go
Yep.
zone.
He's in the no-go zone. And I need to learn something about this buck, and I've got some time. I'll go in the woods right here, and I want to see, when he came to the road, did he stop and look? Did he do it once or twice? If a buck is coming and he wants to go that way, and as he approaches the road, he stops and listens to try and see if anybody's coming, and then steps up a little closer and looks to see if anybody's coming, and then runs across the road, those are good signs. And if it's a real big track and I see this evidence, I know it's definitely an older buck. And odds are good that this was probably a crossing in the daylight. Not necessarily, but it might be. If he comes walking across the road and he's steady the whole time and everything's perfect, he probably did it at night. He could hear well, he knew it was no big deal, and he just came through. But if he stopped and did even one listen, that's a good sign. Big deer that have been tracked a lot and that are older, they know roads are trouble, and he just proved how careful he needs to be to cross the road. He's very experienced. That is a good thing, especially if he's alone. And he pulled up and stopped and listened, and pulled up and stopped and listened. And then especially if he hoppity hop across the road, odds are good he'll lay down some sign. As soon as he gets across the road and he feels comfortable, he'll make a rub and a scrape right there. Especially like during the rut or in the zombie phase. He'll do that, feel good, and then he'll go back to looking for does again and doing his thing. I love to backtrack a buck to see if he did that. Now, if I can't hunt any of this and I don't know anything about this buck, but it's a giant and I want to learn about him, and I've been around trying to pick up where he crossed, say this is another block of woods and I've been all around it and I haven't seen him come out. Now, and I've got time, and I don't mind learning this buck because he seems so big and he seems so worth checking out. I'll take that backtrack and go back, and if I find a spot where he bedded down and a whole bunch of sign, or he left some sign, now I know how he uses this side of the road. And I'll know how much time Say he did a bunch of feeding and had another bed here, and then he crossed here. And it snowed in here, and when we drove around, we couldn't find it, but he came from over here. I've learned how he uses this piece of woods. So the next time I come back to it and I ride around and I find where he crosses, guess what? I don't have to get out right there because I know he's going here and here. And I can drive back here where the wind is good and come right in and start right in and find him right off the bat. And if somebody else has come here and they're on the track now, good, because I'll go around and come in over here. I've learned something. So like your scouting is determinative. And if it's that big a deer and it's that worth doing, that's how I'd hunt that.
One of the things that we do is on a small scale, we backtrack everything. And in the context of like, what does backtrack mean? Like, do you mean take that buck for a long period to see where he comes from, learn about his origin, learn about all this stuff, right? Learn where he was born? That's a joke that, what was that joke? Larry Benoit said that. Like, I don't want to backtrack him. What am I going to do? Figure out where he was born? That's an old Benoitism. But one things that we'll do is we'll backtrack, 50 yards every track that we end up taking. So you get onto a track. As soon as you start moving in the direction that the buck is headed, you start moving into uncharted territory, and the buck could be that way. When the track's coming from this way and we go that way, we know we're not going to run into him. The odds of that are so low that he loops around, we hit him again, especially if it's pretty fresh. We go this way and we say, well, what is his attitude? And we try to get as much information about how he's feeling, the speed that he's going. Is he walking slow? Is he eating? Is he not? Is he on a dead, like straight away hammering down quickly? We start getting some of his attitude. We do a quick assessment of the track and say, well, is this a catchable one? Is it not? Is it fresh? Is it big? What's the deal? And then if it's something that we like, then we're armed with more information, and then we can instantly start hunting with as much in our arsenal as possible. So we kind of backtrack everything, but not for a long distance. You're talking like 50 yards maybe.
But even if you went in the woods and he was running the whole time and ran right across the road and kept right on going, I'd say, well, maybe there's a guy coming. We drive out around and there's a truck parked over here and he's on a deer track. Yep, there's a guy in the woods. He's going to be coming over here. Let's head back, drive around this block of woods that we can't hunt and see if he busts out on the other side. You keep those things in mind all the time.
Okay. So we're going to let's do, do you own a Remington 7600?
I think Casey's is the 760, right?
Yes.
That's all we have.
Yeah, that's it. The rest of them are bolt actions, and a couple like old school levers and stuff, but we mostly all run bolt action. It's 11:30, guys. We're gonna do a quick wrap up here. We've had you all online with us for so long. We're gonna let you get back to your Sunday. Appreciate you all being here. If you really enjoyed this, let us know. Share this with somebody that you think would benefit from the stuff that we talked about previously. If you got in late and you didn't get the kids, if you got in late and you didn't catch the how to find the hunting spot, how to build your hunter profile, all that stuff, watch the replay. You can go back. This will be up. We're gonna do some kind of like a recap build of this whole thing. So if you want, go to mountaindeer.com. Under the blog, you can subscribe to that. Just put in your email, and when we make all the slides, the footnotes and stuff from this, we'll send that over, and you guys can we'll show you what we were talking about in the beginning. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us. Appreciate it. A 2.5 hour live stream. We could do this all day. So like, if you guys appreciate it, let us know. And we'll do more of these. We want to do another one on the playbook. So if you guys want some more season breakdowns, what phase deer are in, when they're in it, all that stuff, we can talk about some more of that. And from Mountain Deer HQ and the legendary Rodney Elmer.
See you later, guys. Have fun. Take care.
Appreciate you, and we will see you all next time on the next live stream. We might do one next week, so stay tuned.
There he is.
What's up, buddy?
You got a deer, huh?
He's got